Hello and welcome to episode 151 of the Imperial Truth podcast. My name's Greg. Joining me as ever now is Mr. Howard.
Hello, Greg. How are you doing? You all right?
I'm good, man. You?
Yeah, very good. Feeling just coming off that festive high, building up for the New Year high instead.
You're revealing the secrets of recording.
Oh no, cut it out. Cut it out.
Welcome to 2022. A much better year than 2021.
Now we've been established here in 2022. I've now recovered from my hangovers, and ready to go.
Indeed. The year of heresy.
Exact. Well, yeah.
The biggest year of heresy since the first year of heresy. I'm going to put that out there. I'm going to lay it down now. The 10th anniversary this year.
Do you know what? I've not heard anyone put it in such significant terms as that. Presumably you mean first year of heresy as in the first Black Book being released.
First Black Book, it was 10 years ago this year. So first available at Games Day 2012 in September. I think the general release was. I was in that queue. Well, there were no queues back then.
I was going to say I vividly remember being there at that. I took a housemate along who played games generally, but in no way the same way. And it was I think it might have been his first experience of a Games Day.
All right, cool.
And I still tell people about that day, watching grown men run the length of the Birmingham.
Did they have
arena? It was.
Did they have the queuing in place at that point, or was it the free for all?
It was a free for all.
It was a free for all,
but up to a queuing point. So there was a crowd at the doors of the event. The event opened, then a portion of people who knew what they were there for ran, and it was hilarious because there was quite a lot of people perhaps who weren't familiar, who hadn't run recently.
Yeah.
And they were running and sprinting along. One guy fell, rolled, got up, and carried on running. I almost applauded him. It was like, you hero.
It's amazing what non-athletic people can do when they're desperate to get somewhere, isn't it?
We're motivators, yeah.
So I'm trying to think now. We've had 2 years without a Warhammer Fest, and we've had 3 or 4 Warhammer Fests? 4?
It must be. It must be. I don't think it's that many. It's not. There's not been that.
Like 6 years. So it's another 4 years before then. So I remember when Warhammer Forge came out. I don't think there was much of a queue when Warhammer Forge came out, because I think that was the one where I was like, I'm 6'2". And all these people around me are slightly smaller, and I'm a big guy, and I can just not aggressively, but I can just maneuver my way through this mass, and I can reach my long arms over to get attention of the Forge World staff. Thank you very much. I'll be leaving now. But the queuing systems at Games Day were curious. Sometimes things of beauty. The one that went all the way round the hall and out into the next hall was a particularly blinding one. One year they were like, "What's going on?"
The one for the heresy at the heresy release, they nearly shut it down because.
Oh, I think I remember. It was cutting. Was that the one that was cutting across the other queue, and there were issues?
Yes.
That was that
and
year.
There was a problem. There was some issues there. Some lessons were quite rather rapidly learnt, particularly being pointed out by at least one person in the crowd. I seem to remember. They've made some improvements since then, but the excitement was unbelievable. And you're quite right. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, and I would have said they'd struggle to replicate that level of excitement, but I'm not so sure. I think we might well see that kind of level of excitement. One hopes going into this year. Well, I think it could be a way away though.
The thing was, it was brand new then, but it was only a select. For those who weren't in the hobby, 10 years ago, put it this way, when my mate at the club yesterday bought a Falchion model to use in 40k, and people were like, "Oh, what a lovely piece of kit! Oh, wow, what's that?" kind of thing, and it's like, a few heresy players are like, "Oh, it's just a Falchion," So even now, some of these models are really not seen in certain play groups, not particularly huge play group. Back then, some people just had no clue what Forge World were doing with models. So even the fact that Heresy was coming out it almost seemed this little niche thing, didn't it? And And I think the difference now is if they release a big plastic release set, it's going to be everywhere. So your difference is the excitement might not be individually as high, but the collective excitement, I think, will be pretty awesome. It
Yeah,
might be
I think
tempered
so.
depending on how the rules are done. A lot of people who are into 40k might be excited, and then if the rules don't suit them, that might fade very quickly. But there's going to be a lot of buzz about it.
I still, yeah, it would have to be something fairly dramatic to really dampen down the enthusiasm that I would imagine would be coming. But yeah,
So
interesting to
basically,
compare it to them.
the 40k guys that I'm thinking of now will basically say if it's not new 40k rule system, they're not interested.
Mm-hmm.
So although they might like looking at it and might think it's cool, that interest won't go past. Oh, that's really cool. So you won't build a buzz. But it just depends, But I think it's going to be a good year. As you say, there's some chat that it might be being pushed back to the summer kind of release, which in some ways doesn't bother me too much, because then you're hoping that it becomes a summer release cycle, if you will. There's a hope there. But as anyone who follows English cricket, it is the hope that kills you. So just take what you get. Whatever happens, happens. It's cool. We're going to get some cool heresy stuff. Before we go any further, we probably should talk about Element Games, who will have all your plasticky goodness available for. I mean, who knows what's coming out? But GW are going to launch loads of stuff at us. We know that for sure because they haven't stopped for the last however long. It's all there. I keep going on and thinking I'm going to order way too much stuff. So GW brand new releases at 20% off in that pre-order week, and loads of other stuff. Whether it's paints, whether it's brushes, whether it's artist opus brushes, which some people will absolutely swear by as being the nuts. Through to whatever. I say I got Barlin's Tomb, which I played over the weekend over Christmas with the missus, and that was like 36 quid or whatever it was. It was fantastic value.
Funny you should mention that. I was also lucky enough to pick up a copy of that, and have just discovered recently that and it was through Element I discovered it, that there is a terrain pack for that. Well, not for that, but of Barlin's Tomb. Yeah.
Oh yes.
So that was something. Yeah, I know. That was not something I needed to know. So I'd imagine there's a fair few people who maybe have picked up a few items over Christmas and suddenly found, oh, there's extra things I can get, you say.
Yeah, there's pretty handy for that. On there. And they've got their Nottingham store now as well. So if you're in Nottingham, you can check them out there as well. I'll keep bigging them up because I keep using them. In fact, I've got some mats turning up soon for the club that we bought there, some Deep Cut Studio mats as well, for the 40k players at our club. So there's a host of things there for you to purchase. Have you been hobbying over Christmas, or has it been family time?
Yeah, I have actually. No, I've got a few bits in around the hobby, the family time that was necessary. I have finished off my 30k Land Raider. Nice. Bit of a rescue. That I bought that kit while I was still at university, so a rather disturbingly distant time it is now. So it is the venerable Chaos Land Raider kit has finally now seen service. It had its icons and things removed. It's got a new pair of tracks on it to make it 30k. Well, they're 30k specific anyway, but to make it even more compellingly fit in with the other 30k specific vehicles. Finished that off. Well, assembled it at least. Got a whole bunch of resin blister packs that I hadn't been putting together, so I put together a few Praetors. Been quite nice cleaning them up and getting those built and put together. And I'm about to embark on 1,000 Suns Contemptor and a couple of of their Castellax specific versions.
Sure, yeah.
1,000 Suns specific. Is it Achaea?
Yeah, something like that.
Them.
That'll do.
The psychic ones. Yeah, the spooky robots. So I got those on the bench. Did some basing for them today in preparation for building those.
Nice.
What about yourself? Anything up?
Nothing heresy based. So I'm going to an Age of Sigmar tournament. I talked about my Mega Gargants. So built my final Mega Gargant, a couple of Gargants, a Kragnos, and a Blood Bowl team whilst we watched Lord of the Rings over Christmas break. Because that's a bit of a tradition now. Hopefully, moving forwards, it's something I used to do, is try and watch the extended editions over Christmas. So working through a bit of the backlog on that side of things, but we were away, so there was no painting to be had, and I've got back and haven't done any painting yet either, because yeah.
Yeah,
need to just fire up that painting juice. Did play a game though at the club last night, which was good. Giles came down to the club. Giles I will give them the shout out. The Merchant Princelings podcast. It is very much not safe for work. In not just language, but maybe topics of what they talk about. But we have
Interesting.
You have Giles and Tom and Will, who I think their main focus is events. So they're talking about the events they go to and what they think can be done better or worse. And but Giles came down. Yeah, so Giles came up, bringing his Cults and Militia army, his traitor Cults and Militia army.
Nice.
He had a nice 2,000 point game, which was good fun. Break the custodies out, and Giles has only played, I think that was his 4th game with the Colts, and using different stuff than he'd used before. So it was very much one of those games where he learnt a few things, like backing off from custodies for a turn to make sure they can't charge you turn 2 is not necessarily a bad idea.
Yes.
That kind of thing. And maybe some of his target priorities would change next game as well. Like, it's very easy sometimes to launch a mortar at 6 Sisters and maybe kill them all, but 6 Sisters with bolt guns probably do less overall damage than 1 custodian with a spear that can charge.
Yes. Okay.
So there's a balance there to try and work out what is the priority target, and what is the we'll shoot them. So which is quite good, I think, for him to kind of appreciate
you took them out that rather than the demons. I thought you'd have had
easy to carry. The
Well,
demons are in multiple boxes at the moment, where I'm making loads of noise here, where I need to get a box. I need to do some more magnets on the bases. Need to re-go over a load of them. So they're just kind of sitting around in different places. The custodians, who also need some touch-up work. I've been meaning to varnish them for a while. I never got around to it, and now I've looked at like my Telemon and my other bits, and there's like some paint chipped off, and I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna have to do little bits of touch-up work, and then actually get around to varnishing them as well. I've got a lot of those little jobs which just aren't fun, and you're looking at your already sort of finished army, and it's like, I need to do these things to it, but I've got loads of models without any paint on them, and it's
cycles.
Cycles
is the way. Doing that iterative cycle of like, actually, I quite fancy doing this now, just to work on that. Sometimes you don't quite have the energy to start up on something new. Like that.
A slightly dry and nicer day would mean I could sit outside, and I'm using a silicon kind of a silicon cork thing, so to put the magnets on the bases. So you don't really want to be doing that indoors because it's quite pungent.
That's a good idea, because I have found that with magnetizing things, they do tend to rip themselves out quite quickly. That's a good idea.
The problem I've had is
substantial.
I need to score up some of the bases to allow them even more chance to grip, because a couple of times they've come off from the base even as this is a thing where we've got a metal iron that's been glued to a breeze block, and you ain't moving. It's not a metal iron. It's just a handle. That's right, glued to a couple of breeze blocks, and you just pick them up, and the only thing holding it is that stuff. There's various versions of it, it's that you can get from a plumber's merchants or whatever. But sometimes just where it's super smooth, it hasn't really gripped onto anything. And then on the others, sometimes it's bases that have ended up being sprayed while they're on the side, so the paint's come away with everything attached to it. So it's just me being lazy when I was doing it. So I've got to kind of take an afternoon to go through, score up a load of bases, and then redo it. But yeah, it's you don't want to be doing that in an enclosed space.
Nope.
So it's just another one of those little jobs where it's like, oh, I need to spend an hour doing that, and I've got to get it all out, and I'll go and do this instead.
Yeah,
But
I know what you mean.
hopefully we'll have a dry a day soon that I can just go and sit outside. And if I do it outside as well, I can put a sheet down. I'm definitely not going to ruin anything. Because that's the other
I don't
one.
know. There's always a way to find a way. Though.
Yeah, there is. Usually my clothes. That's fine though.
Yeah.
I had a spilt pot of contrast paint. I think it was the other day. Just where I knocked it, just it was in my hand. I think I just like kind of half slipped, half dropped it, and I was like, okay, so those trousers are going in the bin.
That's the
Definitely
end of
not.
them.
Yeah, and I picked a boxers up out of the dryer. Actually, I was like, what's that stain from? Oh yeah, that was
Everyone
the
loves that conversation with themselves.
that was the incident with the Gore Grunter fur contrast paint or whatever it was.
Of all the colours as well.
Yeah, so
Could be worse, I suppose, the fluorescent blue, but yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, whatever, it's boxers. Who cares? But but yeah, it was like, so I can cope with that. But yeah, so yeah, played a game against Charles, which was pretty good. Kind of just some mainly for like forgetting how tough like Telemons can be and whatever. And my Telemon always seems to underperform anyway. But the Achilles, Contemptor Achilles with the spear with the
Yeah.
las cannon in it. It was just like that thing can be a thing of beauty at times. It's just, mind you, actually, I say my Telemon can underperform. In the end, it turned around. He had a Solar Macarius with the Vulcan Mega Bolter on top,
Oh yeah.
which is possibly my favourite tank that Forge World have ever made. I
It
think
is
it's
an absolute,
just
and you said it does seem to
stunning.
attract some of the best paint jobs.
Yeah, I think it's got that element of being like you could easily see that being rolled out in the real world. You could see
Yeah.
some mad plan, and they've gone, yeah, we just put this mega Gatling bolter on the back of this tank, which looks like it already exists anyway. Yeah, it's a fantastic tank, but in the end, I did turn my Telemon onto it and go, I'll plink you with my gun. Oh yeah, cool. Rolled the 6 to get one penetrating hit. Brilliant. I'm like, okay, if I hit with this, I could get the extra hits as well from its special rules. Oh no, I've hit and I've exploded you and done an extra. Oh, you're dead anyway. Okay, that's cool. But yeah, no, it was a good game. I say, when you're using an army you haven't used before, particularly when it's, Giles has played a lot of Space Marines, so if he picked up, he's played Sons of Horus and Ultramarines particularly, but if he picked up a Night Lord's army, they're still Space Marines, aren't they? You have a general idea of what you can do. When you're picking militia and you're trying to work out, okay, what do I do here? What do I do with these tanks, which are, they're not like Land Raiders. They're 14 on the front, but you don't want to expose your sides of your Lehman Russes. You certainly don't want anything getting around the back. That kind of thing, you need to play it a lot differently. And Ogryns, while they're great and can do a lot of damage, if I charge 4 custodians into you, I'm still going to rip them to shreds.
You got the kind of
almost
the double hit there in some ways, where you're playing against something you're not necessarily used to facing, with something you're not used to wielding yourself. There's the double learning curve there, but that's part of the fun of it.
Well, some of it's risk management. So he went for a charge onto some sisters with his Ogryns. We were talking about it afterwards, and I said if you actually pulled those Ogryns back, my 5 sisters with bolt guns aren't going to do anything to much of your army, really. They're there to plink the old boon off and control the board. But if you pulled them back, I suddenly need a 10-inch charge to get in with my custodies rather than like the 6-inch charge. And actually that probably doesn't happen, which leaves you able to step up, shoot them, and then charge them. And particularly the spear guys, like they're that much better on the charge because they're going from strength 5 to strength 6 against toughness 6 Ogryns. Like, that's a big swing. Plus, not that it matters their AP's going from 3 to 2, but sometimes it can. Plus, I'm getting the extra, getting extra attack. You're losing out on the extra attack from charging. Like that, all those things added together can be the difference between winning combat by 1 or 2 or losing it by 4 or 5. Like,
Yeah.
So and the fact that you can't then shoot into them, as I say, he had 2 strength 10 like the bombards.
Mm.
Which I say he killed like a whole unit of sisters with one, and I'm like, actually, I 5 sisters, 1 custody is probably worth more than 5 sisters uh, in that kind of game.
How many custodians did you have on the field in that size
All
game?
right, so 2,000 points. Oh, I'll get the list up, shall I? Oops, I've just knocked a blood letter on the floor. My desk, that's right, it's way out of the way. My highly organised paint station. Where are we? Talons of the Emperor. Here we go. I had Assistance to Silence Oblivion Knight Centura with a Paragon Blade. She's 105 points. She can never wound anything, but she's 105 points. A Shield Captain with a Power Gauntlet, Irish Strikes, Presidium Shield, and Digital Lasers. I mean, he's just a beast, even without being a Tribune. 4 Custodian Guard with the Spears. With metal bombs, 4 Sentinel Guards with the swords. 2 of them have Power Gauntlets with them as well. 6 bolt gun girls, 5 bolt gun girls, 8 Oblivion Knights, so the elite ones with the swords. And he actually fired his bombard at them, and they've got a 4-up save against template weapons invulnerable from their cloaks. So,
Right.
but they were forward deployed, so he was wary of them charging up militia and striking them down. And I had the Contemptor Achilles Dreadnought, 3 Venatari with the flying dudes with metal bombs, and the Telemon. So it's only 11, 12 custodians, including the captain, 2 dreadnoughts, and the rest is sisters. But it's things like he was worried about the Oblivion Knights, because they've got 2 attacks each, and their swords are quite good. But actually, if you shoot a few, they're going in, they do some damage, but he's still got weight of numbers in units, like 20 odd in unit, and there's still toughness 3. But 3 up armor save, but there's still toughness 3. So you're getting a lot of wounds. He was using the Grenadiers, so they were better armor. They were toughness 4 dudes. So I also wasn't guaranteed to be getting the wounds through with those swords either. And he had medics and discipline masters, so the discipline master could make you re-roll just by executing a model, taking a wound. And then he had the banner, company banner as well, which means when you're within 18, I think, I can't remember the range, maybe 12, might be more
Probably
than that.
12.
You don't basically you're stubborn. You don't count wounds in your combat res.
Oh, right. Okay.
So if you lose, you just take the leadership, not minus wounds. So he can hold those sisters up and he can wear them down, all except for the HQ. She's got 2 up arms. Even then, she's only toughness 3. Like you will get through her. So those little lessons I think were really good for Giles to kind of pick up on. It's amazing sometimes how you can look at a game, and it's only when you put unit X into unit Y and you suddenly realise actually that's not as bad as I think it is. Sometimes when when you do the maths in your head, you err on one side of the other because your brain thinks, well, that won't happen. It's like, well, actually, no. If you just look at the figures, the variance is quite limited on where it goes. Actually, it's really easy for that to occur.
I think that's essential part of just playing games. That's where you get that feel, and that's exactly what you were doing yesterday. Sounds excellent.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, listening to Warhammer Fantasy podcast years ago, and there was one guy who just never played outside tournaments, but every time he turned up at a tournament, he smashed face because he had the ability to read stats, rules, and that mix it all together and know 95% of the time what was going on. And then another guy who won very regularly was like, no, I have to just take it and put it into stuff. He's not a not unintelligent guy. It's just that's the way he learned. So, yeah.
I think that's fair enough.
It's all good fun. Anyway.
Sounds good. Sounds like a good game.
Yes, but now we're in 2022. We're going to get some more heresy done. It's going to happen. Got to be done.
Well, I think that's where the excitement lies, isn't it? Really.
Starting to rearrange the room already. I'm going to move the desk around, and then we'll get set up. Even though this room is not ready to be changed over, I won't have the new furniture. I can start to lay it out as if I did have the new furniture. I need to order a new chair to hobby in. If people have got suggestions, let me know. I'm a bit stuck between buying a decent office chair and a gaming chair. I'm thinking office chair.
I've done quite a lot of research into this
Oh, you
because
have,
I
have you?
needed one as well. So I've got a recommendation,
Okay, cool.
and it's a sort of cross between the two. It's
Right.
technically a gaming chair, but it's at the end where they aren't cheap and nasty and actually do more
Sure,
harm than
yeah.
good. There's quite a lot of those that are in that bracket, and when you have to start really stepping up, they get very expensive very quickly. There is
Yes.
a there was one brand that I found was good, and that I bought a reasonable office chair. Office chairs are always going to be better once you start paying over a certain amount.
Right, yeah.
But that amount is quite a lot, and it was something I just couldn't justify, particularly as I haven't been working from home, so was unable to do so. So I could see there's a bit more justification if you were working all day in it as well, but for purely hobbying for a few hours at a time, I just couldn't. You can't justify the multiple hundreds, even getting up into the almost £1,000 for some of
Yeah.
those
I,
office chairs. Those are serious business.
I was watching some authors chat a couple of days ago over Christmas
Mm.
about getting office chairs, and I think it was Josh Reynolds, might have been Anthony Reynolds, was like, "Yep, it's definitely this one. Yes, it's expensive, but I've been through. In the time I've had it, I would have gone through 3 office chairs."
Mm.
And I'm like, "Okay, cool, 1,200 quid." I'm like, "I'm not spending that much. I'm prepared to spend a few hundred quid. I am not
Same,
prepared to
same.
spend £1,200 on
And I
a
could
chair."
understand it for some, but it's just not something
Yeah,
I could do. And I think you're
exactly.
right. I think there's times and places, but I just couldn't bring myself to do that.
No,
I was a
so
big
we'll
fan
talk.
of the yeah. I'll send you some links.
Groovy. Yeah, so I think if I can, yeah, we're in a bit of limbo where we're waiting for everything to be done. But I'm like, actually, I can rearrange this room in prep, and then we need a new sofa bed in here, and I need a new desk, and then Emma will need a desk at some point, and it's going to take a while and what have you. But I can set it up as if we're so when if something comes up, I can just grab it. If I see a nice table, I want a higher table as well, so I might have to raise it up because tall guy sitting at these desks, you can hunch over far too easily, can't you?
Oh, I think that's so important. Not something
So
I've done very well at, to be honest.
no, I'm terrible at it. So yeah, that kind of thing. But yes, should we talk about what news we did have towards the
Well, there's a
end
fair
of
bit now, isn't there?
last
Yeah.
year? Indeed. So the Sons of Horror Praetor was released. It is fantastic, having seen what people are doing with it, and some nice conversions of it as well.
Yes.
Um, uh, like because we talked and you were a bit surprised at how much I loved it.
I'm surprised. I continue to be surprised, but it's completely been the case where lots of other people agree with you, as it's one of
Yeah,
their favourite releases of all time.
I just think it
Yeah,
screams
absolutely.
heresy.
Yeah.
It just fits the heresy aesthetic in so many different ways. Yeah, you're standing on rocks, but I think we just have to get used to that. If you don't like characters standing on rocks, I got bad news for you, son.
Yeah. Is it rocks? Is it rubble? Who cares?
Yeah, exactly. But
It's
yeah,
some
that's
stuff to give it
yeah,
some extra. Well, fine.
absolutely. We had another exemplary battles.
We
The
have a
battle
very
for Armatura.
a good one, a particularly
Yeah,
significant battle, of course.
absolutely. And yeah, so I think we are going to have to kind of revisit these as a whole at some point. We've got the first of the Legion specific destroyer squads. So the Red Hand Destroyer Assault Squad, 4 Ravagers, 1 Blood Bonded. That's a nice name for a champion there.
Particularly nice image, I thought, that introduced them. The converted set that they had, the photo in
Yes,
the exemplary battles. I thought it was a particularly good one,
yeah,
setting those guys out. But yeah, absolutely.
they look fantastic, and they seem to be pretty good in that they're not too different from regular destroyers, but they've got a lot of weapon options. You've got your meteor hammers in there and your phalanx blades, which can be really cool, especially when you consider the meteor hammers is +2 strength, isn't it? And you can
Yeah,
also, have all the phosphex in there as well, so you can be laughing as you instant kill marines.
I think it's quite a potent combo,
Yeah,
frankly.
it's not
I mean,
bad.
the beauty of these is that they're not designed, they're not intended to be these crazy combos, are they? And that's a good thing that
Yeah,
they're something else. You know, they're a different
yeah,
mix of these things.
yeah. I don't think they're over the top at all, but they're good.
No.
Hardened armor, all that. Yeah, counter attack. It's pretty good. Special rules: they must charge if they're within 12 inches of an enemy unit. If it's more than one, you can choose. Now, of course, if you have a gun on them that can shoot over 12 inches, then you can shoot a unit that's further away. Therefore, meaning you're not eligible to charge any closer unit. So that might be a good sneaky way of trying to avoid that. Although there aren't, because they come with pistols. So you are relying on having a missile launcher in your squad if you're doing that, which might not be the best option. Or what else is in there? No, pretty much the missile launcher. Um, or if you kill, I mean, you might fire 10 pistols into the one guy you can hit in a squad to kill him, so you can't charge him, that kind of thing. But it's cool. I mean, the only problem with that is you're going to face, in fact, in ZM, that could be quite annoying because of the initiative to be able to shoot a full ballistic skill on Overwatch. I haven't even talked about the event I went to. We'll do that later. Uh, uh, and then Ravaging Assault, they get on the turn they charge, they get +1 to the amount of wounds inflicted, which is nice, and +1 to the result of sweeping advance rolls, which is pretty nice. So
The other thing with them is that their squad size is a bit bigger, isn't it?
yeah, up to 15, isn't it?
Yeah, which is a bit unusual. Well, is either unique or highly unusual for destroyers.
No, it's cool. There we go. And if they're 10 or less, they can be in a Rhino or Land Rover Proteus. There we go. Yeah, I just think they're cool. Yeah, they've got some good options. They're quite sweet. Yeah, up to 10 Ravagers at 15 points each. They seem like they're worth taking ahead of normal destroyers potentially, but without being.
I'm all for a squad as well that can put in those World Eater specialist weapons, as you
Yeah,
said, because I think they're just kind of cool,
yeah.
And I think it's sort of, I think it's either a brief has been set out for these or whatever. Someone has written something for these. I feel the marriage of description and rules has worked rather well.
Yeah,
thematically spot on, I'd say, with this one.
Yeah, exactly. A whole unit with meteor hammers, 15 of them with meteor hammers. Lovely. Why not? It's all fun. Yeah, but it's good to see that there's this continuing. Hopefully, we'll get some more. Haven't looked a huge amount of the missions yet, but they looked quite fun from what I saw. We'll have to sit and dive into them at some point. Quite like the fact. Well, the one thing is there's the which one is it? The ambush. Where they have terrain set up and they have a road running through it, and they have rules for roads, which could be interesting, maybe moving forwards. So basically, if you're on a road, you move an extra 2 inches.
That's right, yeah.
Which here a clear area. It's quite interesting to hear other people talk about it. It was like, yeah, lots of other game systems had rules for roads in their systems for a very long time. This is absolutely nothing new. What is interesting is it's +2 inches to anyone, and people were like, "Oh, why is it? All of a sudden you can move faster." And it's like, well, it's not necessarily moving faster; it's being sure of your feet. So even if you're in a jump pack, like you don't have to worry about where you're going to land, that kind of thing. You don't have to worry about overhead, like going between buildings and getting caught up on electric wires which haven't quite broken.
Because even if you are a heavily armored killing machine, bioengineered killing machine, you're still going to look foolish if you trip.
Exactly.
Because if your footing just slips out or your footing goes out, whatever, it doesn't matter how much you're crashing through stuff.
No, and the one place you don't want to be is laying face down on the floor with your weak parts exposed to other people. So yeah.
Oh, sorry, I caught my power pack on that door on the way through.
Exactly. But what's nice is actually a slightly different ambush scenario as well. So it's something you might have to look at using, because it's not. The ambush setup is terrible in 30k. It's just something I won't even use really, because it is so prone to just causing non-games.
I just like the way these things are all packaged up as well. I just think
Yeah,
they look
absolutely
cool.
brilliant.
They bothered to put a little bit of style into them. I think yeah, very nice. I'm
Yeah,
a fan.
very cool. And then of course we had the Black Library preview, which started off with 2 non-books, which is always good and pleases our friend Michael so very, very much.
He does. It's fine. He doesn't really mention it much.
I don't know whether it's better to. I think it's better to get them out of the way first. If you're
Yeah.
going to do that, I do think that is better. But we have Fafnir Ran and Mr. Dominion Zephan.
What a couple of characters as well, particularly Ran. A couple of
Yeah.
major characters to come out swinging. It's
Just the shield on his back, the twin axes. I like the head. If you don't like the head, put a helmet on. Like put a different head on. Like it's cool. It's so easy to do. The helmet being strapped on his back. Oh, remember to take that off if you put a helmet on him. The shield being strapped on his back is just fantastic as well. He's a beast. He's awesome.
He looks huge as well. He looks physically intimidating as a
fills
leader
up that base,
type character.
He?
Well, he does, and it's like Pollux does. He's a physically large.
He's supposed to be, isn't he?
Model.
He's supposed to be pretty strong.
Exactly. Yeah, and I just think as a character model, he's a good one. It's quite an uptick in the level of detail.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at those axes. I have parts. In fact, I don't have the hand,
cool.
but I have collected a set of parts, including a 3D printed head, to try and make it as close to that fairly iconic image from one of the books.
Yeah.
And using the standard axes and the power axis, the Mark IV power axis, etc., is fine and would have looked cool. And I'd chosen specific Mark III plate to make it look like the image of the book. This takes it up another level. That level of that sort of little fluting you get on the axes and they're slightly larger and the larger grip on it and the Imperial Fist logo. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have a dedicated model like that.
It is sweet. And then Zephan, I mean, we'll talk about like Fafnir Ran. Okay, I can understand that one. Zephan, who, as a character, I assume he's going to be available to all Blood Angels players, but, we see him, particularly in this guise, he's nice, he's on Terra. He's doing his thing. But first time I looked at it, I was like, how's he joined to that base? Oh, yeah, he's got a metal foot. Oh, yeah, with his metal hands and everything else. The head, again, I'm not sure I'm sold on the head, but cool. Put a helmet on, crack on. He's looking good. That shoulder pad's pretty cool as well.
I think the head is quite. I think the unhelmeted head, that paint job that they've particularly chosen going with that slightly vampiric look to it is a choice. I think and interesting they went with Mark VI. I thought not one you would typically associate with them. An interesting choice with the jump pack as well, referencing a particular mark of jump pack that was I think from an older model of Chaos Raptors from back in the day. So yeah, overall a very cool sword in there as well. Yeah, lots of detail. And following suit with that, when they did the 2 characters from the Hollow Mountain and what was the one that came before? It doesn't matter. There's a Custodian and the Sister of Silence. 2 characters on their own in plastic, capturing 2 characters from the books. Love it.
No, was it Gaunt before?
No, he came since. I think Gaunt's come between. I think it was Gaunt before these,
yes,
and
then
there was Aaliyah and I forgot.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
But those 2 excellent
and
Custodians and Sisters models.
The biggest thing about them, confirmed plastic.
Well, this is it. This is very exciting. Particularly, I can see RAM being used as the basis of. If everyone at some point had to make a conversion using the Pollux model, I think we might have a successor to that.
The new one, and like quite a lot of him. Like apart from so if you look at him front on, okay, his banner's got a hand on it, and there's a 7 on the groin plate there, which you could potentially easily cover up.
Yeah, notice also that it appears to be. I think it's embossed. It's embossed, so you could fill that in rather than having to shape it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Bit of green stuff over that. Easy.
Like once you do that, I mean, if you're converting him and maybe taking the axes off, you could easily slice off the fists if you need to on those axes. But if you look at the front of the model, there's like 1 bit, 2 bits that need to be removed to stop him being and a fist, and you can change the shoulder pad easy enough.
I suspect that shield on his chest plate, I suspect that's going to be a separate piece.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
there's going to be a few bits and pieces like that will just drop off anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot that can be done with that, which is pretty cool.
These two are coming in February, I think. Well, not confirmed.
Did they say?
They didn't say that. They didn't say it's pure conjecture. But previously,
Black
Library Celebration's been in February. Yeah.
Yes, it wouldn't make sense, which is cool, which is pretty good. I wonder if these were originally designed for that release slot and have just been kept.
Interesting.
As in, they were supposed to be out after the box, but they were just like, okay, we'll still put them out because these are the first two plastic models outside of that structure of being in a box first, aren't they?
Yeah.
So
hard to call in this instance because because it ties to the books, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it does. But if they were that tied to the books, surely, Zephon would have been out. Well, could have been out a while ago. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. But
yeah, it is. It is.
It's just good to see plastic. Like ages ago when we were responding and talking about people's attitudes towards heresy and things like that. Like if there's anything that tells you that heresy is being given proper treatment, it's being given time on the plastic runs.
Yes.
Because those machines could be churning out Primarch Space Marines or whatever is the latest thing that they're going to be churning out. Like we're getting a new Tau book soon. We're getting Eldar. Like they could have been putting Eldar and Tau through those machines for a long time. As we said, GW is still trying to catch up. The fact that they've donated or they've denoted time to put into 30k is a very positive thing.
I think you'll make a strong point about Eldar in particular. I could see
Eldar are going to fly. How many years is it?
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Like,
there are people in the hobby considerably, what is it, the Warp Spiders, some of the oldest models.
Yeah, and you think of
entire Games Workshop range.
Yeah, no matter how cool even those striking scorpions and fire dragons are, like or Dire Avengers, like they're still cool models, but bring us new ones with them, and like even just the preview stuff that they showed, like our group's salivating over.
And the thing is with Eldar having the legacy of players. I know people who don't play the hobby anymore and haven't for 20 years, but they've still got a soft spot for Eldar. Marines have sort of evolved into something else. Eldar, though, have got quite the place. Similar to Orcs.
Yeah.
They resonate with the people, and the people who play them are passionate. I could see that being a huge release for them.
They're also a painter's army.
Yeah.
So you might get people who don't necessarily play as much who want to paint up some very pretty Eldar. Which is cool. On top of all that, we got more maps coming out. Shock! We knew we were going to get the maps coming out. We had the next character series novel, Sigismund the Eternal Crusader, limited editions, Parker's Black Library Celebration, written by John French. Which some people have their issues with John's writing. They're not a massive fan of him doing fists. I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be cool.
I think I'm a fan of John French's writing.
And what's interesting, so this is so the blurb has the Emperor's return to Terra, blah 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 blah. As the Imperial armies fight the final battles of the age, Remembrancer Solomon Voss seeks the answer to one question: why does Sigismund, first captain of the Imperial Fists and greatest champion of the legions, believe that war will not end? Granted a rare audience with the Master of the Templars, the answer takes Voss on a revelatory journey to a time before Sigismund became a Space Marine, through his first battles and oaths to the bitterest duels between legions. So we're getting a wide scope story there.
Yeah,
which is cool.
I thought that. Hearing John talk about it on that preview, I thought it is certainly sounding quite compelling.
Yeah, and actually reading that, thinking back to some of my favourite John stuff, like he can write two characters interacting. I suspect there will be flashbacks and lots of writing in that style, but part of me is almost looking forward to Voss and Sigismund just sitting there answering questions. Hopefully, who knows? Who knows? I'll be getting that for sure. And then they did save a reveal for the end. Sigismund at the gate. Sanguinius at the gates with a load of corrupted sons of Horus. The cover of the next Horus Heresy novel.
Yeah.
Mr. ADB's novel.
What a very cool looking piece. This, I thought.
It is. It is like, what makes me laugh is I don't think people have seen the stairs behind Sanguinius for starters. There's some artistic, license taken with this picture. Those gates are either not the main gates, or they are very far back, which the lights kind of suggest they are decently far back, or it's just done as a piece that's designed to work because
Yes,
the gates
exactly.
the gates are huge, like if they're the main gates. But who cares? It's just a glorious piece of artwork. I almost prefer the versions where Sanguinius is playing guitar.
I have to say I hadn't seen it.
Have
That's
you
the
not?
first I've heard of it as an
He's got
image.
like the
Brilliant.
guitar high up, like holding the neck high up in his left hand with his hand having
I'm looking at it
strummed
now,
down.
and I can
You
entirely
can see it,
how
can't
that would
you?
be
Yeah.
a thing. Yeah.
Hello, terror. Yeah.
Particularly as the guy, everyone in front of him, that could easily be a mosh pit.
Just be a mosh pit, absolutely. Yeah.
These seem to all be pointing in different directions.
Guy at the back's like, "Bring me my drinks. He's died."
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic.
The really sort of the weariness in Sanguinius's pose, I think was a good call, and a tough one at that. With these, when you compare that with his early imagery in the early covers and things, where it's this sort of resplendent character, and now it's kind of he's quite literally bruised and beaten, but he's still holding. That's going to be a hell of a moment.
And I like the fact we got here. Just in case you weren't aware, Chaos takes its hold of the legions well before the heresy ends. For all those grognards who want to believe that the fighting up to the end of the siege was pure, it really never was. It's not what it was. The fall, when people give themselves over, the fall's quick. And that dude at the back, he's not being welcomed back to Terra.
I've only just noticed the infernal glow inside his bolt gun. Even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And the guy in front of him with his little spikes on his helmet and stuff. There's some really cool stuff going on. Yes, loving it.
There's a traditional piece of art by the chap who works with ADB. Oh, goodness me, I forgot his name. Colorophobia, I think is the name he goes by. Of Sanguinius at the gates, and it's decades old now, I think, and it sort of tends to do the rounds. This is a sort of quite an interesting, not reference directly, but there's an echo of it here, and I think there's only so many things you can do with this type of image of what it needed to hit certain beats. I'm sort of pleased it does in some ways.
Yeah.
It's reminiscent of that in the best possible way.
And I'm still not sure what we're going to see from that book, but I am super looking forward to it. It's going to be awesome. Okay, and just before we move on, I should probably mention, I went to a ZM event in Burgess Hill at Dice, and I can't even remember the name of the place now. It almost feels like it's been too long ago. Dice and Drinks in Burgess Hill, which is it's a nice little board game cafe / kind of gaming place, and they have lots of stuff for sale, which is always good. Let me find. And we had 3 good games it was the first event that Paul had run there. So some Zone Mortalis boards, some terrain, in an ideal world would be a little bit better. I think Paul knows that. Some of it was very good, like the layout. So it was all good. Some of it just needed a bit more. Some official Zone Mortalis heresy stuff, some made from other bits and pieces, which was good. But I had 3 good games of, tell you what, trying to get all the rules back in your head, particularly when you're playing Zone Mortalis. It's like, I didn't play a huge amount of Zone Mortalis, before that. But yeah, it was interesting for sure. But yeah, it was really cool. Who did I play? I played. Oh my god, I can't remember who the first person I played was now. I think it was Tom. I think it was Tom's Sons of Horus, which really beat me. It was really nicely done. Sons Army. I played Chris Close, who bought a loyalist army and had to switch over to traitors because of someone not turning up. And yeah, had a fun game, but one of those games which kind of was easily decided. It was the first time I'd ever taken Sisters of Silence with Flamers because I thought it was Ometalis brilliant. At least if someone charges them, I can burn them up. And Chris decided to enter a bottleneck. And I told him the Flamers were there, but I don't know if he just forgot or wasn't paying attention. And I stepped through with these Flamers and proceeded to put like 15 hits on one unit and 21 hits on another unit.
Yeah.
So I don't care if you're wearing power armor and oh yeah, and they've got shred in this game as well. Okay, that's cool. Like, yeah, that was fun. And then I played Randolph, and which was a good fun game. Actually, kind of steamrolled him in the end. Got into good positions, and the custodies did their job. But it was nice to see like a little community in Burgess Hill that hadn't played a huge amount. I think there was a Space Wolf player there. I can't remember his name, who had like 10,000 points of Space Wolves and hardly played a game or played like 2 or 3 games of Heresy. So yeah,
That's
that
cool.
was good to
That's
see.
cool though. People were playing it. Was it a good atmosphere?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there were, Paul made sure that he knew there were a lot of new people there. Like the first person I played, I think it was Tom. He we were playing. He had a Contemptor, and I think I immobilized it in combat. And he was, oh no, that's right. We charged into combat, and he was like, "Oh, my rear armor's this," and I was like, "No, dude, you got a weapon skill. I can't hit your rear armor, unfortunately." And he's like, "Oh, we played that wrong the other night," shouting over at his mate. He's like, "This, you always hit the front weapon, front armor." He's like, "Yeah, I've just found that out." Which is kind of, it's one of those things. It's a big book, isn't it? And
Yeah.
and it's not until,
Particularly
and
haven't played in a
even
while.
yeah, oh yeah, big time. So there's always these little things that crop up, even for experienced players. It's like, oh, that rule I've never actually had to use before, and it doesn't work quite as I thought it did. Uh, but it was good. They seemed like a good bunch of chaps. So if you're near Burgess Hill, it's a distance for me. It's like an extra, well, it's about 40 odd minutes drive. But my gaming club's 35 minutes drive away. So like I said to them, because they were talking about having regular gaming sessions, and I was like, start a Facebook group for or if you've got them on the shop page or whatever, put up an event or a group and have people sign up for it, and that way, if I know I can make it one night, I can remember you're doing it because it will be up there, and B, I can write down, I want to come along that week. And I just think having an easily accessible place like a Facebook group or an events page on the shop would be a good time to do it. And if you do them regularly, like even if it's once a month, then people know it's like the third Wednesday of a month or whatever. It gets stuck in people's head that way. So if you are anywhere near Burgess Hill, Dice, what did I call it? Dice and Drinks in Burgess Hill. They do have a website for the shop, but it's still under their old name of Shrunken Terror as in Earth. And I'll tell you now, they had some Blackstone Fortress expansions on the shelf.
Did they have
no
respite?
Sorry?
Did they have no respite?
No, indeed. They had a Cursed City box that was expensive, but wasn't as expensive as it can be. The Black Fortress stuff, they had some core boxes as well. They also had some like Blood Bowl stuff that I don't think is available anywhere now, and some other little bits and pieces. It seems to be one of those shops which has stuff around every now and then, and you could find, let's say if you're looking for a Blackstone, they only have one or two. I can't remember which ones they are, but if you were looking for them, it would be cheaper than getting them on eBay, kind of thing. So, but that is Shrunken Terror, is their web address for that. It's one of those ones that I'm definitely putting on my list of possible places to pick stuff up. If my normal suppliers, like I've got 2 or 3 now, you almost want to keep them quiet, don't you? When you find
Yeah,
when you find a
yeah, it's
place, it's
almost.
like,
Yeah.
oh, they've got a few of these things. Do they order all this stuff in? They also do what's interesting. They do a 3D printing service. They got 2
It's
3D
me.
printers in the shop, and they were talking. One of the guys involved was walking around. He was like, "Does the thickness of the walls matter in Zone Mortalis?" And I'm like, 99% of the time, no. 99.9% of the time, no. It's only for Marigal Dreadnoughts, really. It's just about creating corridors. He's like, oh, okay. Do you need this? Do you need that? He's like, I'm thinking about 3D printing them. And I'm like, okay, we might be able to find files. But I think he was looking at designing some. So they have more terrain, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a good little find, that place.
Yeah. So it's cool. It's always good to have somewhere else local and to see a community building up as well. But we've talked for almost an hour, which is usual. We have much more pressing duties. So should we leave that there for a break and come back?
That's a timely moment, yes.
And let's find out who is the greatest Primarch of them all.
It's that small matter.
Well, we're into our third and final part of our working out who is the greatest Primarch of all time. And here we're going to deal with the lore. So, in kind of any way you want to approach it, I think. Whether it's about the stories, how cool the character is, or what have you. This is the kind of widest ranging one, I think, and possibly the one that will see the greatest diversity if people were doing their own. Because you haven't got a mini in front of you to base it on. You've got a number of stories from old lore, from new lore.
It is that, isn't it? It's the range of sources that you can
exactly.
I mean, it's so much in the case of some. There's just so many obscure sources, such a range for some of these. It's
for some of them not. And that might
quite the opposite. Yeah,
particularly one. But as I say, there are no excuses. This is definitive and binding. Tough luck. We will accept no. Don't at me, bro. As the kids would say.
You're so cool, Greg. I just can't keep up.
I'm so hip. Okay, should we just dive in, shall we?
Yeah.
And so as usual, going from 18 to 1. And then after this, we can add all the scores up and work out who is the greatest Primarch of them all.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to let you go first in this.
18? Okay. How about our good dear friend, Ferrus Manus?
Really? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So Ferrus Manus' greatest part in any Black Library story is when Horus is talking to his skull.
It's true.
Right. That is the best bit he has. He has a Primarch novel. He has half a book, and then the odd fleeting bits. Oh, he has a simulacrum based upon him in a book for a little bit. That's about it. So there's just not enough there for him to be any higher. He's an angry man, but we don't really get to see a huge amount of that. He seems like a cool, brusque dude who gets very angry.
And there's hints, and almost in many ways, the absence of some of that exploration is almost more tantalising. I'm being slightly generous here, and I'm specifically painting another viewpoint here. But in some ways, there's an element of that because there's hints. You see, there are people who talk about him. I think Gilliman says at one point, "Give me any one of these 3, and I can hold anything, or I can hold and take anything." He says at one point. He's included in that. Horace looks up to him.
I take it Gilliman's assuming that he doesn't just run off because someone called his mama fat or something. But Horace talking to his skull is just one of my favourite short stories. All stories in the Heresy, anyway. I must re-listen to War Master at some point. But
it is the interactions. And I was thinking this, and just when I was reflecting on this as we were but leading into this, I was thinking it's the interactions between Primarchs, which can occur in almost
Yes.
any of the stories, that in these just small moments are some of the most insightful, most interesting, and Ferris doesn't get many of those.
No. What we need is the buddy cop, Ferris and Fulgrim. Great Crusade, like frolicking out, having fun as
That
best
would be
buddies.
awesome.
But yeah, there's just not enough, and what there is it's a little bit. Oh, look at Angry Man, he got angry and lost his head,
Mm.
which is mucho a shame, but means for me he is way down the list.
I think I would concur with that. I'm making this up on the fly. I
Oh,
think I would concur.
are you?
The one I would put who would compete with that for me is Korax.
Okay, interesting.
Korax for me is down there as well because tricky. I'm suffering a bit with Korax because I haven't read his Primarchs book, so that might
Okay,
paint it in a
which
different light for me.
is post heresy,
Okay,
I
and
think,
but
if
it
I
may
remember.
have it
Or
may
is that?
have it may paint it in a different light for me. But I find Korax's background. There's some moments, like for me, one of his most significant moments is the bit where he drops in during the drop site massacre, and he
Yeah,
drops in and he saves. No, it's when he's going for Lorgar and Kurz drops in and is able to hold back Korax, but only just,
yeah.
and saves Lorgar. There's moments like that. You're like, oh, actually, Korax is pretty cool here, isn't he? But I just don't find him as compelling
Sure.
as a
Yeah.
lot of the others. Now, that might be because there isn't a great deal there. I think all three of the sort of Shattered Legion Primarchs suffer from that, whereas Vulcan, however,
Okay.
has probably been expanded upon out of those the most.
So,
I would
is
argue,
correct your number 17?
because I'm going to agree with you with Ferris at
Ferris.
18. I think he has to. I'm going to put
Okay.
yeah.
We'll come back to corrects. We will come back to him. My 17 is Mortarion.
He's going to be low, isn't he?
Oh, he's a whiny little. Right. So some of it for me is based on stories. Some of it is based on character. I could not stand to be around Mortarion for any period of time. He. So the whole. I hate the people who defend him. Oh, the Emperor's so bad to him. No, the Emperor said, "Cool, I will let you try and kill your dad. Like you can't do it, but I will let you try and do it. When you're failing, when you fail and you can't do it, I will step in. Deal." Mortarion says deal. Emperor does exactly what he said he would. Mortarion's like, oh, I would have had him.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the whole reason he's got a problem with the Emperor. Don't get me wrong, Mortarion was in a bad place, in a bad situation, wanted to get out of it by himself, couldn't do it. But like his whole gig against the Emperor is, he stepped in when I didn't want him
He
to.
does in every portrayal. He comes over quite badly. I think
Yes.
he comes over as it's not I can see another point of view here, or that's a really interesting. I just don't find that with Mortarion in the same way. I
No.
found that I agree with you. I think I find his portrayal. He's intended to be dislikable, but
Yeah.
he succeeds.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? So I always used to have a thing against Dawn for being the biggest douche in the heresy, but he had to be. Like
Mm.
he's a Jobsworth, but that's his job is to be the Jobsworth. So it's not a problem. It's not bad writing or anything like that. Mortarion is the whiny one. He's never really satisfied. Like he's kind of hanging on to Horus, like hoping that he'll get some satisfaction from that. He doesn't. He hates magicians, and then
Until he
understands
doesn't.
he's until he doesn't because he's got this latent ability, and he's got no real conviction in what he is. Like Perturabo we'll get on later, but Perturabo's like, no, I'm not dealing with any of that.
I
Like,
do think you hit on a key point there, because I think your point about comparing him with Dawn and Perturabo, because I think Perturabo is very easy to put in the same category in the same way that you could put Dawn in a similar category, where there's this sort of not whininess, but there's I think that undermines it, but there's a dislike, a great deal of dislikable character traits to them, of which I think Mortarion of those three is by far the worst. The person
Yeah,
I certainly find I struggle to resonate with in any way.
yeah. Like for all that Perturabo has his issues. Like, I mean, it took a long time. He sided with Chaos, but did not fall for a very long time. Like,
Mm.
and even on Talon, he even turned down. Like, and we'll do
Yeah,
Perturabo later.
we'll touch on them both, but I think I agree with you.
Mortarion would not do any of that.
Suffice to say, I would say Dawn and Perturabo have both had several other moments covered in the
Yeah,
books that makes you see them in a very different way. And there are several occasions I can think of for both of them. I don't find that with Mortari. I find
no,
that even in some of the
indeed.
later representations of him, it still makes you dislike him.
Even his turning, and even Warhawk,
I would say especially.
where it reviews that, and it's like, oh, I've always known what little man's up to. What's his name?
Callas. Typhon.
Yeah, Typhon. Like, I'm like, that doesn't make you look any better.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just makes you look worse. So that was 17. I'll do my 16 then.
Mm-hmm.
My 16, where are you? I can't find it now. My brilliant system is failing me. So I reckon this is going to surprise you. The Lion.
I thought he'd be low.
Just
Didn't
can't
think he'd be
like
that
him.
low.
Just can't like him at all.
His is the most recent Primarchs book I've read, and I can see entirely what you mean.
Like, you just get. Do you know that I think the book he comes across the best in is actually Lehman Russ's Primarch novel.
Yes, agreed.
I think
Yes.
Chris does a fantastic job on that. But you look at him in his first book, and he's like, he takes over and he does these things, but it's just towards the end when like he's reacting to Luther, and it's like, I know the Lion's got issues, but that they go through his books. Like, I mean, everyone's got the problem with him, decapitating someone for speaking out. Fine, I don't, it's cool. That's a nice bit of story in a way. But the way he treats Luther, like the silence he keeps them all in, like the silence of what he's up to on in Ultramar when he's hunting down Curse. Like, there's no doubt the Lion as a fighter and everything else is super cool, but he's never likable.
It feels like it's a deliberate. I mean, in the same way
Yeah,
with Mortarion,
absolutely.
it's a deliberate move, and it's
However,
interesting that he is that version on the loyalist side. He is by no means the goody two shoes. You could never
but you
put
do.
that bad in.
I do think that the thing. So he's not likable, which is fine. Characters don't have to be likable. They do not have to be likable at all.
No.
Well, no, I mean they can be, but they don't have to be.
But they don't.
But you need to understand
they
them.
shouldn't all be in some
No,
ways.
but you need to understand them. And when you get to that point, if anyone can tell me why the Lion, I know he expects everyone to do their job because that's who he is. But the lack of contact with Caliban the whole time, you just think you could have solved half your issues like with the simplest of tasks. And at some point you just question it. And then the demon he has to help him get around places and everything else as well. And you just think, and it's all so double standarded and everything else. So that is the Lion down there for me. Like, hard choice, but he had to go.
I'm not sure it is. I don't think it is as surprising as you think. I think I would agree with you. If we're going on sort of a likelihood thing, the only thing that might push the Lion up is he has got a few more moments where you think, okay, yeah, that was cool. You made a hard call, and it was the right call. He has got more. He's certainly got more of those than Mortarion, which is why I would put in the similar slot, either at the same or possibly one above him. For me, would be Fulgrim.
Oh, okay.
I find him, and it might be because I find Eidolon a similar way, almost by association.
Well, yeah,
but I find in a similar kind of way, I find that the character of him again has very little redeeming qualities, and he makes a fantastic villain.
Sure.
I would argue he makes a better villain than Mortarion does. I mean, his scenes in the Saturnine, for example, are brilliant. But as a villain who you want to see defeated, You
Well,
want to see him slapped.
so I'm going to say now. So Fulgrim's my number 14, and
Mm,
yeah, like he is brilliant in Saturnine, but um, but he's also like an arse. Like
brilliant
he's
as
so
as someone you want to see take a
he's
slap.
so selfish. He's
Yeah.
so yeah, he's so wrapped up in himself that he's like, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm going. Like, screw the plans, screw everyone else. He's selfish. He always was. He was weak
Mm.
with the demon, uh, and it all gets a little bit I don't know, quite cartoony with him a little bit as well.
I
I
think that's a
feel
reasonable. That's why I would probably put him low. It's why he'd be at my sort of 16 kind of level, because of it, very much that. And even when you see him in the Crusade era, the way he's portrayed in his Primarchs book, he's not a likable character. It's
no,
intended that way. Obviously, it's written that way. But he's a very selfish. Look at me, the glory hunting, but in the worst possible way.
yeah.
It's not a likable character by any stretch. It feels like there's just about more redeeming features with the lion, but it's in a similar kind of ballpark to me.
Okay, so have you actually working off a list, or are
No,
you?
I'm doing
Okay,
this
so
on the
you're
fly.
okay. Are you writing down what numbers you've put and who you want where? Because I think you're going to end up in
Yes.
knots. Oh, you are good, cool, ish. So your number 16 is full.
Yes.
Cool, no worries. That's good. So yeah, I put him at 14. So when we get to that, so your number 15.
I'm going to say, this is going to hurt me somewhat. I'm going to put Vulcan there.
Oof, that's low.
It is low. It is low, but it's only because I'm looking through
Yeah.
the rest and thinking, well, who else?
Is that so? Is that because of Vulcan himself, or is there an influence on his books from
Probably an
his
influence on
books?
his books. And
I
it's
do
because of
think,
his role in the heresy as well.
sure.
It's quite.
This is
I
the
quite
only
like
problem.
Vulcan as a character.
Yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, the only problem with us doing this now is I didn't want to wait for a year and a bit till we get all 8 books for the
No.
Siege of Terror. So we are doing this without Sanguinius doing his major book thing, and he's already done quite a lot. Vulcan is in place to do something. If he doesn't do anything, then he deserves to be even lower on this list. I think he will. And Horus, and we're going to get slightly more from those last 2 books, but I say if you keep waiting, you'll never do it. So
Yeah,
there'll always be another reason not to do it. So yeah, I can understand that. I can understand Vulcan.
It's tough. It's largely because there's something else that I like more in background terms for all of the others.
Sure.
So he's almost down there by virtue, but that says something in itself.
Yeah.
So I'm putting him down there. I find his sort of taciturn character again slightly harder. It's very inward looking, even though he's the sort of most, well, at least his Legion is portrayed as the most humanitarian almost of the lot. His role is obviously diminished by the virtue of what happens to them. Yeah, exactly. And his actions and his sort of inward-looking reflections. It's equally, we know somewhat the character he becomes, for those who have read it, post-heresy.
Yeah.
However, that materialises. And
so
I find him a dislikable character there, at that point.
Sure. I've put him a fair bit higher, although I have been scribbling some bits out and changing some orders around recently because it is far too easy to do. So
just to clarify then, my list as it stands is 18 Ferrus, 17 Mortarion, 16 Fulgrim, 15 Lion, 14
the 15 Lion, cool, good, groovy. 14 Vulcan. Yeah, I think he does suffer for those things that you are talking about. For me, there's an element of I think I really, as an English sporting fan,
I love a heresy discussion that starts like that.
I get a certain amount of like the underdog, the guy who's toughing it out with very little
Mm.
hope of success appeals to me. So, like, one of my favourite sporting moments ever is watching Michael Atherton bat against Alan Donald and getting peppered. And it was only a few overs, but it seemed to last forever. And, like, you just looked at it like, there's no way this guy can survive. How is he doing? Like, it's not going to happen. And he does it. And like, I think it's slightly an English trait, particularly for sports fans. And I think Vulcan has elements of that when he's caught by Kurz. He's putting him into no-win situations, and he just has to struggle through. And then he goes from there, all the way through to McCrag, where he's lost his mind. He manages to kind of come back from that, and he still wants to do his thing. He still wants to be the guy he needs to be, and he's got this role now in the Heresy, which hopefully is going to get that payoff.
I
And
think this is really interesting because what you're describing is a character I really would quite like. This stoicism to him.
yeah,
I think it's his isolation that I find problematic.
sure, yeah, I can absolutely understand that. Yeah, he there's not much apart from Kurz. He doesn't get much time with his
No.
brothers, and all the time he does get with
Or anyone,
or anyone. Yeah,
really.
true.
He doesn't
And
get to mix
even
with his own legion.
I think there is an element of the War of the Beast, which does feed into this for me, in that
Definitely does.
there's a future for Vulcan, and that future potentially goes all the way through to 40k. And so, what he is as a perpetual adds something to that character, which he is truly distinct from all the others. And so that elevates him a little bit for me in having that. And
Yes.
the other, and his legacy of the things he's created as well. The what he's got on Terra, is that the same thing that's there for 10,000 years later?
Our discussion here as well is also based on them very much almost in their heresy period. I would
Yeah,
argue here the role he has on his legion, reading about that in the Black Book and about what the salamanders were before he came around, I thought was fascinating. I thought that made him a very strong candidate. So I'd almost quite like to have him higher, but
you can't quite fit it.
can't
That's
fit
fine.
them all in.
Cool. Mine's a little bit further up, so we'll get there on that one. So my number 14 is Fulgrim. Oh, we've done that one. Yep, nice and easy. So that's good. I'm going to cross those out because I've already done them. So
I realised in my
hopefully find them.
rundown earlier I missed off my own list, which was Korax. Korax was my. So we'll do a recap maybe at halfway point, and I'll make sure
have to
you've got my full
revisit
list.
it. That's fine.
Yeah.
13, I've got Kurz.
He's my 12.
Okay. He's just a bit too. So he does his thing, but that's it. Kurz is his thing. He is his caricature. And he's selfish, and he has given in to these visions, and that's about all he does. I feel, and then he doesn't make it all the way either, which doesn't help him. But essentially, what he's doing on McCrag is not much different to what he did with Vulcan, and then he spent some time as a prisoner on trapped in the Invincible Reason. There can't be too much depth with a character like Kurz. In fact, Kurz's best, the best parts of Kurz's lore are actually Sanguinius reflecting on Kurz.
I completely agree. That was probably one of the most significant moments where I found that most interesting.
He does have some good moments, and we'll give him that. That's why he's there and not further down, like blowing up the Gilliman's little palace and that kind of thing. He was the action baddie in the whole of that arc for Imperium Secundus. So that's kind of why he's there and not lower for me. But he is limited because he's a caricature. He's a comic book guy.
It's that comic book role that I think is the most problematic with him. Is that
he can't be too deep because of who he is. Although there are some that bit with when he's worried about Corax is coming, and those kind of things. Bear with me a second. I've got to pause this. I've got to tell. Okay, that was a bit of a, a heavy interrupt. Had a bit of a family issue, and we were recording the following evening. Events have occurred. Howard has found his list, which has changed certain elements. We will recap
I love this. I love
the
this. There
changes.
was a warp rift. There was a
There was a
time
warp
jump.
rift, yeah, indeed.
Let's go with that.
So
Let's go in theme. Yeah.
Howard has shifted some of his scores in relation. It's only basically an extra one's been put in, a few moved down. That's fine. It's all good. In doing this, in the confusing manner that we do it, I realised that I missed my number 15 off completely. Who is Lorgar?
Which wow. Okay. I've got him a little bit higher. I
So
suggest we maybe cover him in a bit.
we've missed him out already, so we're going to carry on. We're going to do a recap of our positions halfway through, and then we're going to talk about Lorgar when he appears in yours. So that's cool. So we were talking about Kurz being a comic book villain type character. However, I still think that um, had cool elements within
Yeah. I think comic
Imperium
book villain is
Secundus.
still fair. I still think that's fair as a
Yeah,
way of
but he
describing it because
wasn't
comic book
bad as a
villains are
comic.
cool.
Yeah, he
But it's
wasn't
just
bad as a comic book villain, but there's only so much weight that can be attached
yeah,
to
that's
that.
fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's Kurz, and we were moving on to number 12, which in the new timeline, in the new Marvel Cinematic Universe, in the multiverse, is now number 12. Yours is Vulcan. Mine, he says, forgetting what I've written down, is Angron,
Okay.
and
Okay. Wow. All right.
he's kind of that high because of his Primarch book.
Which is
A
still, I think, one of the
tremendous.
best. Yeah,
It
if
is
not the
fantastic.
best.
And
It is fantastic. I completely
however, he's still broken through most of that.
agree.
But that little bit at the start where he isn't broken is painful and brilliant and wonderful. But he is again a very simplistic. Now, don't get me wrong, he goes through pain and hurt and betrayal, particularly from Lorgar, really, in the guise of helping him out. But he is a very simplistic character. Um, I think the best thing about Angron is the people around him. Best thing about Angron is Khan and what's her name, the ship captain,
Latara.
Latara Sarin. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that for me is why Angron there. He's the charge forward. Want to rip stuff to shreds. Want to kill everyone near me, and
I
particularly
do
by a certain
feel
point in the heresy, just does not care.
that's accurate, but I almost feel that because that's what his character was about, particularly at the beginning of Black Library, taking a look at the heresy as in the way that they have, and arguably the way Forge would have, that he seems to have almost interested quite a few people enough to say, how can we do more with Angron?
Yeah,
How can we
absolutely.
make him more? And as a result, I think he's ended up becoming considerably more interesting than the
However,
one-dimensional I'm the Lord of Destruction.
yeah, but the problem is he's interesting based around the people who are viewing him. So he's interesting in Master of Mankind because the Emperor and Archenland, is it Archenland? Anyway,
Mm.
the Emperor and whoever are looking at him. He's interesting in after Deshaya because the way Khan's looking at him, like he himself isn't doesn't drive my interest per se. As
You could argue,
it's
though, that that's merely a lens to look at his background.
you can, but I don't think his actions are interesting. He slaughters people. What's interesting is like after Deshaya, right? What Angron does there isn't that interesting. He's the bad guy in the shadows that is ripping people to shreds. What's interesting is the effect it has on his legion, but that's not
Yeah,
purposely driven by
okay.
Angron. Yeah. In many of the books, he is the elemental force.
Is it
Uh,
after Tashea where there's that
I think it
where
is.
there's that countdown? There's the one where the captain after captain's going in to meet him.
Yes,
I think that's after Tashea.
I could be getting. I think that's after Deshaya. Matt Farah.
Okay. There's a
When we first.
brilliant one. There's a brilliant one. Another one where it's an early. He's adopted the Legion. They're carrying out a compliance, but he said it must be done under a certain timeline.
Isn't that
And
his Primarch novel? Isn't
Is
that
that the
part of that?
Primarch model? Is
I
it the
think
Primarch model?
I
Because that
can't
just
remember
makes
now.
it
I'm
even
getting mixed
cooler if
up.
it is.
I think it might be the Primarch novel where they're talking
Okay.
about they're walking in, starts off beforehand, then kind of cuts back. I could be wrong. It's too many
Okay.
books get confused.
It is.
I
Even
think it
so,
is
it's
Primarch.
it's another part of the Angron story, and I think yeah, you could yeah. I take your point. That is then looked at through the effect it has on the Legion, albeit through a very interesting diktat that's been brought down
Mm.
from Angron as a character. But
But it's
still,
like,
cool.
yeah, it's like King Kong, in King Kong. Like he's only interesting because of what he enforces on other people, because he isn't thinking the way that we think about it. He's an animal reacting to his situation. Um, and Angron is, he's not that. Obviously, this is a me being a bit hyperbolic, but um, as I say, I think Elemental Force for me is what he is.
There's a greater
He
tragedy
doesn't.
though. I think that's why he's
There
quite
is, and
he's quite high. Well, not he's not that high, but he's a solid mid-table for me because of the Primarch book, because of his
yes,
number of elements, and because he represents one of the greater tragedies of the
which
Primarchs
is
in general.
only really because it makes me laugh because again, because there's that whole kind of the Emperor screwed him over, blah 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 blah, you know, and he should have just done this and just done, there was like by the time the Emperor met Angron, Angron wasn't going to accept anything. Angron just wanted to die with his people. Right, there was nothing the Emperor could do at that point to bring him on side. Yeah, Angron's the best bits of Angron's character occur before he's anywhere near part of the Imperium. It's the loss of what he was in those slave pits and what he could have been. And I'm going to have to read the Angron book again because it is fantastic.
Yeah, the more
But
we talk about it, the more
but
that fills
yeah,
out something. Yeah,
the more you
and then that is talking about with the benchmark of things like Betrayer, which
yeah
is
don't
obviously brilliant, and yet the Primarch's book takes it on so adds so even more depth to it.
yeah. But if you
That is
think
quite remarkable.
if you remove the Primarch's book from it and say what is Angron coolest for? Oh, he lifted up a Titan that stood on
Yeah,
him,
yeah. Raw
and he
power was
raged
left.
this,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, and he took the spaceport, and slaughtered everything there, and it's like, well, he didn't outplay people, he didn't do, he didn't converse with someone in a way, da, da, da. He does occasionally, like, he confronts Lorgar in a very direct manner,
Mm,
which is cool, but it's limited for me, so that's why
mm.
he's there.
Yeah, fair enough. Should I say where he is for me?
Yeah, why not if it's close enough? Yeah.
It's not. He's number 9.
Okay, it's not too bad. It's
He's
only
number
three
9
different
for
there.
me.
He's
Yeah, so he's in the same
just
ballpark.
below centre for me.
In the same way that we've sort of talked before, there's almost 3 groupings, and I have to sort of try and think the same here. There's mid-table, there's the lower table, and then there's that upper tier, and he's solid mid-ground for me for that reason.
Cool. Do you want to do? I can't remember what order we were doing them in. So
My number
that was
11.
12.
My number
Yeah, your
11
number
hasn't
11.
been done yet. My number 11
Go
is
for it.
Perturabo.
Ooh, okay.
Now that was tough. That was tough because it was, and fittingly, there was him and a certain other Primarch were jostling for a similar position. They could almost be the other way around.
Oh, interesting.
However, his good friend ended up being a little bit higher, largely because of some of the most recent publications.
Okay.
Perturabo, there are so many stories where he's just totally unlikable. And
Yep.
in the same way that we've been talking about with, say, Tarian or a Fulgrim or similar, and you just think, just that bitterness becomes so tedious in some cases. It's hard to sympathise or like, and yet then there are other stories that come out, and you're like, oh, actually, that's quite cool. Talon being a key one of those, the way he reacts to that, the way he rejects it and goes, actually, no, put that back. We're not dealing with that. And the same with where the moments in Mortis, where that was a pretty sizable. I think we're okay with non-spoilers here.
Right. Well, I'm going to stop you there. We're going to come back and talk about
All right.
Perturabo
We'll circle
a
back around.
little later
Right.
on, and we are going to spoil up to Mortis.
I thought we probably would.
Faux shizzle. We are going to do
Are we
that.
spoiling? We're spoiling Warhawk. Are we okay?
Yeah,
with that?
we can spoil Warhawk. This you can't have this talk, I don't think, without carrying all the way through, particularly when we get to a little later on. So where are we? 11, Perturabo. I've written that in. I'm on it this time. Brilliant. My 11 is, I changed these round. My 11's Vulcan.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool that we were quite so close.
So
Okay.
yeah, he's around there. I do think, yeah, and we talked about him when we talked through yours a little bit earlier on in the weird timey wimey wibbly wobbly. But yeah, I think there's a lot about the character that's almost yet to be, like, there's still more potential with that character, and that's an exciting thing for me.
Yes, that's a good point.
We can see a lot more for him, and he has the potential to really echo forwards. And for a loyalist Primarch, that's not necessarily the norm. So that's my number 11. Number 10 is Mr. Guilliman.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
He's he's a bit bland. He's a bit all right. He's not as bad as people think he is or like to make out he is. He's also kind of cool, but nowhere near as cool as he could be. Um, I like the. I mean, he's an organizer at the end of the day. He's a very good one. The best bits about his character for me, the Avenging Sun, the angry thing doesn't. Like,
That
it's
never comes
cool.
across for me. That's not what I think of
No,
him as. No.
yeah, whatever. I get that he can be, and that's because of the nature of him growing up on
Mm,
in Ultramar and all that jazz. It's cool. That's fine. The kind of what I think I like about him the most is his ability to go, oh, these legions do that. Let's try and input that, a little bit of that into my legion, and let's try and put that. Like, there's no, he's quite happy to sit there and pick and pull and not to admit that he's got it all right, whilst also trying to make everyone a little bit better.
mm,
Um, and his ability, although Imperial Secundus is his idea, his ability to step back and go, right, actually, although the information was flawed, like to kind of the ability to stand up and say, if it all has all gone wrong and we have no information that it's not, kind of thing, then a stand needs to be taken here, and it needs to be done the right way. Like,
mm.
and you can see why they bought Gilliman back into 40k because of those factors.
That perhaps because he's that more analytical character. That's why he's in a similar area for me, but he's a little bit higher. You do get to see a lot about. There is quite a lot reflecting on his thought processes, what his thoughts are on the evolving situation, what burden he feels this is, what he is, and maybe that's because equally we've seen quite a lot of him reflecting on that from the position of 10,000 years later. Even there is material there out there that him's reflecting on that. I'm trying to disregard that for the purposes of this thing. I still find him an interesting character. I think people will almost like to dislike him, particularly if they've got more affinity with the traitor Primarchs. But I find him far more compelling, particularly the way they've expanded him.
It's cool to not like the Ultramarines, isn't it?
And I
Because
disagree with that.
it's just old. I think the older I get, the more I'm just like, whatever, mate. About a lot of those things, I like memes in general. I'm just like 99% of them aren't funny. Don't bring them around me. Maybe I'm just an old curmudgeon, but I feel like that. But what's interesting about him actually a little bit more is post Imperium Secundus, when the three are going for Terra. He knows that, like, Sanguinis has got to get there. Like, he's the daddy. He's the one who's got to get there, and Guilliman will make sure his legion allows Sanguinis to get there. And while we're doing that, why don't we raise the planets of the of the traitor legions? I like that little bit of bite. I did get a bit. Ruinstorm was the one for me where it's not necessarily because of Ruinstorm in and of itself. It's because we've had Guilliman a few times in the build-up. Practical, theoretical, and then the enemy always seems to plan for the practical, theoretical. So he has to then, like, there was a bit too much of, they've planned for my logic, and now I'm have to think on my feet because I've walked into this trap, kind of thing. I think they played on that just a touch too much. It started to get noticeable. But yeah, I like him. I just can't like him. It's weird because I think someone like Angron has bigger swings for me, like and various other ones, but Guilliman doesn't have that. He's a bit of a tighter focus on how much I like him and why I like him. but he doesn't therefore reach to any extent either way either.
Yeah, I'm almost surprised. I've almost found it hard to put him lower in a way. I would say actually he's so significant and
Yeah,
what he represents, and therefore presumably what his background is. And I kind of want to know more, which I think is
yeah.
quite is telling. I'd like to know more, and I think there is more going on there. So I put him a smidge high. But yeah. He's your
Cool.
11, is he?
He's my 10.
10. Okay. Mike, do you want my
10.
10?
Yeah, I would love your 10.
Dawn.
Dawn.
He went up a fair bit because of Warhawk.
Yeah,
Which
I think
sounds
mine
weird
jumped
considering
up.
he had such a relatively minor role in that. I thought the way he was portrayed, even in Mortis, at the moment of that, and there was this sense of gravitas to the way that was delivered at the very end of that, and what was happening, I thought was brilliant. But then to see him utterly fatigued, and the monologue that came along with what happened in Warhawk, I thought was brilliant. And it painted a whole other side to Dawn, who we've seen a hell of a lot of, actually. There's a lot of background there. I think, again, he gets quite a hard press. People don't like him because he's this sort of slightly po-faced kind of character. But I disagree. I think he's got some very interesting moments.
Well, he started off very, very much like that, and again, I think I said it before. Like he's he's a job's worth, and he's a bit of an arse, and therefore I don't like him. But he's supposed to be that person, and that's fine, and he's well written as that person. Him slapping Garrow, um, Garrow. God, my blimey,
Yeah.
I'm tired. Him slapping Garrow across the thing. How dare you tell me my brother's. Kind of this all the strict, so strict keeping to the rules, but then you see comments online of like, what if someone else was chosen as the defender of Terra instead of Dawn? How would things have been different? Well, almost every single one of them would have opened the door to the Emperor's plans and had a look, and Dawn was basically the only one who will say, no, I've been told not to open the door, so I won't open the door.
Yeah.
It's black and white. Almost everyone else would have had, in the end, had something that would have broken and gone, you know what, this is too important, I will do that. Magnus would have opened it within about 3 seconds. I know you didn't tell me to, I don't tell me not to, but I just had to check that you were doing it right. But then the siege happens, right? In fact, then Praetorian of Dawn happens, like the Soul System
I was
happens.
just about to bring that up. A Praetorian of Dawn, brilliant.
And at that point, you get to see he's a bad man, right? He's a tough cook. You get to see Alfarius trying to do whatever Alfarius was trying to do, and then Dawn's character of, no, I know my truth, and I'm certain of my truth, and I can't trust you, so I'm not even going to let you speak, right? Which I just think is a wonderful characteristic to have in that kind of character. It's just stunning.
And I think there's been some awesome scenes with Dawn that put him higher than all of those who I had lower than him. There's scenes with him just again and again and again. He comes up with these incredible moments. Saturnine being
Saturnine on the wall,
incredible.
and he's doing that whilst manning the siege that
Yeah.
no one else could man. Like Perturabo talks about, he's like, I would have won this war if it was anyone but him. And he taught me this. That Perturabo's like, oh yeah, he taught me this aspect of winning this fight and whatever. And he does all that, and then the remembrances, and that whole kind of the future of, while he thinks that Terra is dead, he still realizes he has to push forward with these ideas. Guilliman's not coming. Great. Okay. Well, yeah, you can carry on for the future but he won't give up just because their chances of victory have disappeared. That doesn't mean and this is where the job's worth comes in. Goes, yeah, I am going to lose, but it's still my job. I'm going to do it, right?
Yeah.
So that stoicism,
which becomes it sort of circles back around to being admirable.
yeah, absolutely, it does. And he has moments in the siege. He's still not likable, right? Really, but there's a huge amount of respect that goes to him because of that. Mine's a bit higher than that, I will say. Okay, do you want to do your number? Oh, your number 9 is Angron. That's nice
Correct.
and easy. Sorry, we talked about him. My number 9 is Korax.
Right, he was quite a bit lower for me. Okay, yeah.
He was 16. The thing with
That is
Korax,
high. That is quite
it
high.
is
Okay,
quite high,
interesting.
and he dropped down a couple, and he jumped up a couple, and he moved around a couple. In fact, maybe a little bit too high, but there's something about Korax I really love, and it's I don't really know what it is. I still don't think we know huge amounts about him, really. Like, we've had
No.
Deliverance Lost, we've had bits and pieces, mainly from other people's points of view. But then you read the Black Books, and he was pretty tough. Like, he's like, no, this part of this legion is not what I want. Cool, you can go into that kill zone and be those people, and brunt the enemy's assault and possibly die. That's fine. I don't mind that. And yet, you look at Deliverance Lost, and he's all about that, saving humanity and what have you. And you look at Isfan when he's like, I've been betrayed. I am just going to kill that Mother Hubbard. Right, to the point where Lorgar's like, oh, right,
I'm in trouble.
yeah, exactly. So you got all of that, and then he helps out Russ at Yaren.
Yaren's an interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't see much of that, and that feeds
That's
a little bit
perhaps
into his
why. Yeah.
Legion, and that can work both ways. That can put you off a character, that can kind of create space to allow you to like a character. But almost the best bit of it is I've got to again respect for him when he gets to the end and he looks at what's happening to the Imperium, and he's just like, why are we doing this? Like, actually, the side I'm fighting for, is it any better than Horace's side? Like, and I don't necessarily agree with the fact that he then just goes and disappears. But what's good about Korax is when we get to his Primarch novel, we find out that actually he's not completely turned his face from meting out some punishment. And so there's room in there for me to like Korax, and sometimes that space, sometimes a story can put you off a character. And Korax hasn't had that story, which really puts me off of him. And maybe that book, if there was an extra book written, would be the one that lowered him down. But because it isn't there, as again, let's use another cricket analogy, right? They say, while a team's doing badly, the people who aren't playing get better. So maybe there's an element of that in there, but there's something about Korax that I just kind of dig.
I can see what you mean. It's the potential to be something else, and there's something.
And he's funky and cool.
Something about the sort of setup of Korax that didn't chime with me, and still doesn't.
Right.
And so I think that's why he's so much lower for me. And there has, in the same way, because there hasn't
been that.
Whereas you've gone the innocent until proven guilty.
I
guilty until proven innocent.
I think it needs. Yeah. I think you need an element of, I like this guy, and there's room to think about him. But if you don't have that initial, this guy's cool, then it's like, there's just not a lot about this guy. Like with me, that's Ferrus for me.
Yeah,
there's not enough there to get a grip of, to then allow my imagination to run wild. Whereas Korax for me, there is.
Yeah, I've almost got that more weirdly, and I'm just sort of, I don't even know quite where this has come from. It's even the point I was making with Gilliman. Whereas I find Korax, I think there's more stuff I'd like to know about Gilliman, the way he goes about things. Whereas I found Korax, leaves me a bit cold. So he's up much lower, but undeniably cool moments, just not enough of them.
Yeah,
this is why he's lower for me, but I can kind of see where you're coming from. Particularly, he has got those cool. Istvan was cool, as you say, where he lost everything, went for it. And you think, yeah, okay, I can see that. So yeah, I can kind of see where he's there.
That's fair enough.
We'll see what comes later.
Indeed. On my number 8 is Alfarius.
Interesting. I find this interesting that so far this is probably the closest we've been in alignment out of all
apart
of the
from
three.
Ferrus.
No.
Yeah.
I don't mean the out of background rules and.
Sure.
I'd say this is the one that we've been closest on, which I find interesting. Your number 8 is Alfarius.
Alfarius, indeed.
Right. Okay.
He's
my 7.
Cool. I think I think that middle section of the Heresy, when they played on the Alpha Legion, are we goodies, baddies? I think that hurt him as something to read about. It was just overdone, like undeniably cool in Legion. Like the fact you didn't see them in Legion was undeniably cool, which helped. That
I
all
also think
helps
the fact that
him.
with Legion, when that came about in the way that it did, it was
Yes.
so unexpected. It was so out of step with the pace and everything else. You think,
Yeah. Yeah. It
okay,
was
this
Dan
isn't
at
going to
his
be.
best.
Oh yeah, and it was like, oh wow, okay, this whole batch of books could be something else
Yeah.
entirely.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it sort of turned it up a gear.
And John did that again with Praetorian. It was
Agreed.
like,
Yeah.
hold on. We thought we knew what was going on here, and we
Mm.
don't necessarily know what was going on. And when it comes to Alpha Legion, that's perfectly fit for them as well.
It is, yeah.
Weirdly, so I probably talked about this on the show years ago. But I met a guy once in GW in Tunbridge Wells, and he was reading Horus Heresy, and we were chatting to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, no, I saw a paperback of it might have been Flight of the Eisenstein. I think it was a Jim Swallow book." He goes, "And I know Jim, so I picked it up and started to read it." I said, "Oh, you read it?" He goes, "No, I'd never really done anything GW before reading the Heresy." And we were talking through it, and I said something about I was like, "Yeah, the excitement of the reveal in Legion about there being two Primarchs." He's like, "Oh, what excitement? It was obviously two Primarchs. I mean, they're the Alpha Legion, the Alpha Omega." And I'm like, okay, I haven't talked to anyone about these books who hasn't had it absolutely seeped into their bones that there are one Primarch per Legion,
Completely.
and I can't look at it without that lens. And he was like, "Yeah, it was no surprise at all." But when you listen to Dan talk about it in the interview that I still think's on YouTube, he went there with Legion. He went there with a list of demands about what he wanted to put in the book, and he knew he was going to have to give up half, no, three-quarters of them because he wanted one or two in there. And he sat there and he sat with Alan Merritt and he went, "I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this," and he went through his list. And Alan Merritt went, "Yeah, that's cool." He said, "By the way, we've always thought that there were two Primarchs for the Alpha Legion." It's like, so it didn't even come from Dan.
Amazing.
Like, you know,
I didn't know that. Oh wow! And I've
did you
heard him
not?
speak on it. I didn't know that came.
Yeah, so that was thrown in
Other
extra.
sources. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so but it all fits in with the Alpha Legion. As I say, in the middle bit, I just felt it was like, oh, there's plans in plans in plans in plans, and it almost became like we just confused people. And I know it wasn't done that way, but it felt a little bit like that. But I think with some of the later books, there's started to become this little bit of hold on. There is something going on with the Alpha Seventh Serpent, helped with that, and then Praetorian of Dawn, where it was, it's over the top. Don't get me wrong. That's cool. I have no problem with stuff being over the top.
It was a great
It's
opener, though. It was a great
yeah,
opener for the siege and the coming
absolutely.
out of the dark and the way that they did, and the way they did, and the Primarch book helped.
Yeah, and then his death. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the Primarch book in a second. His death again changed. We got comfortable in the heresy. We were like, oh, cool, they're going to get to Terra, and then we're going to get to see this scene, and we're going to get to see this scene. And then all of a sudden, Praetorian of Dawn happened, and I reread that paragraph. I was like, what? And then people were like, no, well, he's definitely alive. And it's like, well, John said he's definitely dead. So,
Yeah.
Who knows? He's dead. Um, and then people are like, oh, obviously his spirit wasn't actually in there. It was thingy and da-da-da. And I'm like, no. Like there were three parts of that book where they showed that Primarchs can identify Primarchs, like to a certain point. So I'm fairly sure that Dawn knew what he'd done, and then still kept it secret. And then again, that plays forward into 40k, and it's like, hold on, well, Alpharis was supposed to die later on, so who's dead? Are they dead? Who's dead?
And
So
that's what's so much cooler, isn't it? Yeah.
You've got back to that point where you're not sure, but you've gone through these other stages and ended up back there, and then the Primarch novel, which is fantastic, cool story, can't be trusted in any shape or form. Although there are, probably things in that we can assume. If Alpharis was the first one on Terra, then it's kind of cool.
Well, I mean, the Alpha and Omega part of that makes it even cooler.
Yeah,
Just the first and the
exactly.
last, and you're like, and that slightly knowing smile behind them, they're like, oh hi, Hi, Dark Angels. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
and yet,
like, all that, you're like, oh, that's awesome. That slightly self-knowing thing was made it hilarious. Yeah.
and it just walks that line of being too cool. Like,
Mm.
no, Horace, was there, and Horace suspected something was up, and you can't always trust what's written in that book. I say there's one issue with that is Captain Linestra, but that's a side thing for me. But yeah, Alfaris is super cool, but
Yeah, I think
has
he's a
the
cool
issue
character.
of
Has got
I am
cooler as it's gone on.
Alfaris.
Yeah,
I am
yeah.
Alfaris. Oh, Alpha Legion. Yeah, you can be the good guys or the bad guys. Like, just that winds me up. And
It can be a
sometimes I
bit
just think,
over.
oh,
It can be a bit overdone in
yes,
some
yes, it
ways,
can.
and has been, and was in danger of being done. So, but I
Yeah,
think turned
I pulled it back.
corner quite a while ago, and Alfaris as a character became much more interesting.
Yeah, well, look at the Siege, where we've got a character there doing something. So who knows what happens in the next two books?
Yeah.
Yeah, we really don't know. But that's my 8.
Yeah, 7 for me.
7 for you. What is your 8?
Gilliman, who we've touched on.
Yes.
So he was a little bit higher. So yeah,
cool.
he was up there.
Same region. That's 1 or 2 is pretty close, I think, in this.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind how easy it is to go there. So you've got Alfaris as 7. So my 7, which we haven't done yet, and I look through my little list. Magnus.
Whoa! I thought you'd have him much higher.
So did I. I did for a while.
Wow.
He is
Magnus
cool.
was mid-table for me for a while. Not anymore, as we move into this upper tier.
Right, he started high and went lower for me. Because I'm like, he is super cool. Right. Like, he's a wizard. He's the wizard. He's the sorcerer. That's funky. Prospero is funky and awesome. He gets to do cool stuff. Like his Primarch book with Perturabo was super funky and cool.
Oh, that's
and then
really good.
And then I just remembered how he lets it all down every time by thinking he knows better than everyone else, and it just grates on me in not a bad way. Like, and it's like, oh, Magnus, I mean, seriously, like, if you hadn't turned, right, then the whole Wolves issue wouldn't have happened. Horace is fighting, you're on Horace's side, right? That's not going well for the traitors. Simple as, because the Wolves also aren't broken, right? And then they don't get attacked by the Alpha Legion, right? Like, your stupidity, right? Your naivety, which is only compounded by the fact that Araman does exactly the same things, almost step by step, that Magnus does. And you get all the way through to even right at the end, which is a really cool scene in what's it called?
Fury of Magnus.
Fury of Magnus, that's the one. And you're like, no, you've still got a chance to do the right thing, and it might cost you. And maybe, you know what? Maybe it's not the right thing at that point, but there's a price that has to be paid somewhere. And yes, he was damned from very early on, but there were, like, he didn't have to damn everyone else. Like, you know what I mean?
I do.
And so that
However,
sits in my head.
He's quite a bit higher for me because he's that much more interesting for all those reasons you've just said.
Yeah.
In terms of rating the background, I think he's one of the most interesting because there's so much going on in terms of that. It's not just he's done things. I mean, he's not even that. He is, as you say, it's not even a case of if he hadn't turned. It's if he hadn't have been quite so perhaps naive or perhaps optimistic. There's a number of things if he hadn't done.
Blindly optimistic, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. He's like, no, it'll be fine. I've just got to do one more thing and just one more reach. And it's just some brilliant moments with him throughout where it's infuriating that he does go those ways, but it's in the best possible way. Like you're sort of screaming at it because you're so invested. And he still comes across as quite a. I was thinking, I only listened to the Khan's Primarch book, of which he features, and he's got a really interesting character in that as well. And whenever you see him interact with these other guys, all the interactions with Lorgar make Magnus out to be this really interesting. I like the way the others look at him as a genuinely wise character, and despite these foolish moves that he's on.
This is it. This is what gets me. So the first heretic, and Lorgar's like, and Magnus is like, yeah, they were they were looking at censoring you. And he's like, really? Like, did you? He goes, well, I thought about it, but I did speak up for you in the end. But never gets to the point of just telling Norgar that just behave, like just keep it down, right? And then leaves him, like, and blows all the glass out the window or whatever. And you're just like, you probably could have stopped the whole heresy from starting at that point. Like, you could have adapted it from that point, and yet does, like, that person, all the intelligence, quite a lot of wisdom, and yet still naive with it.
Yeah.
Which is a weird mix, but you're a very intelligent, wise guy, and yet some simple things really, like relationships, is a thing for him. Like he's so ahead of the curve that he can't trust other people's opinions on stuff or anything like that, and he just doesn't necessarily connect with his brothers because he is a different level from them. That it becomes almost I don't want to say defect, but you know what I mean, an
Yeah.
issue.
I know what you
Um,
mean, but I think he's got some really interesting relationships with a
yeah,
whole range of
absolutely.
them. Lorgar, Khan, Horus, Sanguinius, a whole load of them he's got these really interesting relationships with. And yet, despite all of the wiseness, the good relationships, whatever, and all of the wisdom, all the capabilities, you get the feeling he keeps trying to sort of make the right. He makes decisions for a certain set of reasons. They just often seem to work out to lead to terrible things, and and often that comes about through
But it's
hindsight
but and
as
it's
well.
but it's always going against. Most of it's going against a very explicit order. Like,
Yeah,
oh, I know you've told me this, but. And I know you said not to do this, but I know better than you, the Emperor who made me. Like,
but it never comes across as particularly whiny, though.
no, it's not whiny, but the actions in themselves are. It's like, oh,
Perhaps entitled.
I know you've told me not to play with the webway, but I don't think you understand the webway quite as well as I do.
Yeah.
Like, as pupil says to master almost every time, and it's cool. Yeah, the thing is, that's what stops it. That's what puts him at 7 and not 4 or whatever I had him at, or maybe 3. I had him at some point very high, and sometimes
He
I'm
is
just like,
high for
I
me.
just want to get his head and ram it into a wall occasionally and go, "What are you doing, you idiot? This didn't work the first 7 times." Like, but he's left us with Ioannis.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting kind of thing. And don't get, like, Thousand Sons are my second favorite Legion. Like, I do love the Thousand Sons,
Yeah,
and I do love Magnus.
I've come to be a big fan of the Thousand Sons of Magnus as part of that, and I use for those same reasons, those same reasons you find yourself sort of going, oh my god, what's happened there? Is the reason he's high for me, because I find that interesting in itself, that it's eliciting that reaction as opposed to that to me is far worse.
No worries. Okay, so you were doing evens, so odds. So I'll do the evens. We'll move on to number 6. Oh, where's number 6? Have I written it down? I have. Mr. Rogel Dawn.
Wow, I thought he was lower. I thought you'd put him
Yeah,
lower. This he's
I
high.
think pre-siege he would have been a fair bit lower. Siege, as we've
Oh
said,
yeah.
just launches him into this echelons of, his dealings with
Rightly so.
Cinderman, his dealings with
Yeah.
the humanity, his dealings with the Custodes, and the issues he has there as well. On top of that, I mean, that scene on the walls of Saturnine was just Dawn in all his gloriousness. To the point, even the little bits like, Sigismund, I release you from your from your commitments here. Just go out and cause hell.
Yeah, that
Like,
was cool.
he knows what
Yeah.
needs to be done in that respect. And he's been an utter, like, if you took every other instance he had with Sigismund before that, you're like, oh, Dawn, what an absolute fool. you know but that one almost redeems all those by itself.
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
and
I
on
agree.
top
Yes.
and on top of that, on his shoulders he's carrying the whole siege, which he knows he's going to lose. He just has to hold out, and halfway through, the Dark Angels are here. He's like, brilliant, awesome. Where is your legion? No, we haven't bought a legion. We bought
It's
10,000 warriors.
yeah.
Oh,
He's like, well, that's not
ah,
enough. Yeah.
yeah, and that's it. And he thinks he's lost. That was 2 books ago.
Yeah.
Like, and yet he's out there being the beacon, doing all that and trusting to the Emperor to do his thing in there. And there's times when he starts to question it a little bit, but he's like, no, I'm here. I'm doing this. And Per Arabo, he's slowing him down. Parterabo ain't no fool.
No, and I think that it's their interplay as well. I think can't be
It's
overlooked.
has helped them both.
There
Yeah.
is no rivalry like it. I think it's fair to say.
No,
I
I
think
think
that
you're
they
right.
are the premier rivalry of any of them. All
Mm.
of the others, it always feels a bit like someone's looking for a rivalry. That one,
Yeah.
been there throughout, been there from the get go, and it helps them both elevate
Yeah.
them both.
Like out of true rivalries that precede the heresy. Okay, Lorgar Gilliman. Yeah. But that was a contrived
Mm.
set of experiences. Um, Magnus and Russ, yeah, but that was more of a bitching thing.
And both of
These,
those examples, they feel like they're because of a result of a single incident, not
yes,
a long-standing, almost ideological
yeah,
mirroring of each other. And you think
absolutely, yeah,
that's those two of them stand out by a distance. And as you say, it improves them both. And I think that's got better because that could have
it has,
easily become really trite. I think, and
yeah,
there was times early on. I would argue, The Crimson Fist is one of my favourite novellas in the whole shebang, and yet there's moments in that where even that gets a little bit. Well, I'm gonna get him. Those yellow guys, I hate them. You're like, okay, a little bit too much of that wouldn't be great, and yet there are moments much later in the Siege, by the same author, even better, where people even start to question it, like, yeah, but you're going after him because he's the other guy, and they're like, and then it will either be Dawn or Perturabo, whoever it is, will say, don't underestimate them. They
no,
are
yeah,
super dangerous. They have a respect for each other, which I think is
yeah, and
fantastic.
Perturabo's like, I mean, yeah, I want to beat Dawn, but also none of you guys can do it.
Yeah,
Like, have some respect for this dude.
yeah.
Like,
You have
I'm
no
the only
idea
one
how
here that
dangerous
can
he
do
is.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I've learned from him. Like, and and I am now better than him, and I will show him. But it's going to be hard.
and the same in reverse, where they're looking at
Yeah,
it like, Perturabo is probably the most dangerous of all of these guys. Like he
yeah,
is super dangerous in this scenario. That respect against each other elevates them both, as you said, and
yeah. It's
I think
super
that plays
cool.
into why Dawn's super cool.
Yeah, number 6 for you. Oh, we
Russ,
didn't. Oh, okay. Russ. Okay.
I was struggling with Russ a bit about where to place him because there's a lot of cool character there, and seeing him pretty much immediately after Prospero, I found was some of the most interesting parts. It's Wolf King, I think, in that novella. I think
Yeah,
there's some really interesting moments when he sort of reflects on what he's done there, where they're going, what they're about, what the rest of the galaxy is, the context of everything. I found that very interesting with him. I find the overall headstrong. I'm mainly explaining why is he not higher, and yet he's in the top group because he's such a significant character. But I find myself immediately almost defending why he's not higher, which
sure.
says a lot.
Yeah,
But it's the headstrong nature, and it's the same reasons you were talking about with Magnus. Actually, there's some elements of that with Russ. Interestingly, for me, that slightly, yeah, but I'm doing it my way. This sort of slight belligerent, I'm doing it my way. However, I don't care what you think of me. There's an element of that I find
yeah,
repetitive
sure.
somehow, or less likable somehow with the way he does those things. On the other hand, he's still kind of cool, and he's out
Yeah.
doing his cool stuff, and you're like, well,
The
that's undeniable, isn't
the
it?
the Wolves were kind of constrained by this fact that they had to go from 140,000 or however many it was, 170,000 warriors down to basically just more than the chapter's worth by the end of the heresy. So they had to, yeah, and it was all over Space Wolf threads. It was like, oh, we lose every fight. Why do we lose every fight? And it's like, hold on, right. Um, there's losing fights and there's not winning fights, and they are fundamentally different things. But Wolf King, yeah, we're going to talk about Russ in a bit, I think. But I can appreciate why you've done that, and obviously people know that Russ is going to be higher for me, um, but it might be surprised.
Yeah,
So yeah,
he's very cool, and there's some very cool background. I found the discovery of Russ and Horace reflecting on that at the time and sort of looking in on him and going like, "Oh, who the hell's this guy?" That's very interesting the way it paints him. And there are certainly moments, but I find, for example, the decision when it was sort of revealed effectively that he went back to Terra and was there for a period, but then went off again. Yeah, like But that's the same reasoning if you have with Magnus. Like, oh, if only you'd have done that slightly differently. If
Yeah,
only you hadn't utterly destroyed the Thousand
yeah,
Sons and
that's
driven
fair
them to
enough.
do what they needed to do. But it's all
I,
hindsight.
I
So
think there's a
he's
couple
still
of
very high.
differences there,
Yeah.
and we'll get onto them later. Your number 5.
The Khan.
The Khan. Ooh,
He has been
okay.
consistently high in every version of this list, of which there have been several, as you've alluded to. Several versions of this list. He's ended up high, and that free spirit, slightly distant from the whole thing. I find him really interesting because he's one of the few that could have gone either way,
Yep.
whereas most of the others almost felt predetermined and kind of were in some respect. But he was the one, and his Legion reflects it, that they could have gone in either direction up until relatively late in the whole show. I still find his reflections on the Imperium, about what it's becoming, about what it represents and what he's going to do. But I do think Warhawk, and as a result, I read his Primarch book very close, reading Warhawk, a masterpiece in who that character was and what he's about and what he stands for and what his Legion and what he abides in his Legion.
Cool.
Yeah, a very cool character. So up in number 5.
I'm going to leave that one till a little bit later as well. And we haven't got much later, so that's interesting. I'll leave that for number 5. I've just realised kind of who you've got left. That's interesting. Number 5, I have Mr. Horus.
Down in 5.
Down in 5.
Down in 5.
And I'll tell you for why. Bearing in mind this is the Horus Heresy. Like, how many stories? Okay, we get an opening trilogy which features Horus a lot, but is very much more about the Legion from within. That's cool. He does go missing as a character from a lot of the Heresy, so it feels like we don't see him as much as we think we've seen him. And then he also that first trilogy, he's fantastic. Yeah. My favourite moment with him is just before they meet the Interrex, or as they meet the Interrex, and he starts to question actually what did the Emperor mean when he gave him those orders. Because at that point, the Crusade could have changed, and the Imperium could have changed, and the fate of humanity and the galaxy as a whole could have been a very much more positive, less dystopian sequence, which obviously could never happen. But he was, up to that point, he was fantastic. As he falls, there's an issue with the fall. I think there always has been that. I think it would be hard for them to have ever written the fall without an issue to the fall. It seems a bit quick, and he does disappear. He is very cool when he is there, but even later on in the books, he's not there because he's not in control. He's not Horus, and I think that's why he's down at number 5 and not slightly higher. Because don't get me wrong, when you listen to War Master, oh my word, Horus is the daddy. He's playing his pieces. Mortarion, we talked about him being whiny and whatever, but Horus knows that he can pull those strings, and therefore Mortarion is the most reliable, loyal person he has with him. Horus knows that, and he won't lose that. He knows he knows what each of them are like, and how to work them.
I think it is that potential absence from it is a fair point, and I think there's another point that puts him in an interesting position. And it's what you refer to as the speed of his fall, and I would say, but yeah, maybe, but I would just put a slightly different slant on that. Of there was almost a sense I got from the books was there needed to almost be a reinforcement, and I think it came in slightly later, that it was his choice, that he hadn't simply been manipulated and hadn't simply been led down a road and just sort of corrupted that way. It was like, no, this is my choice. I need you to be clear on that. And there was almost like, they didn't feel, the writers or otherwise, didn't feel
That they
perhaps
come
they needed
across.
to reinforce that
Yeah.
or something, and they thought, we haven't quite got that across enough.
The
But
problem being,
across enough
the
that
problem being,
those are the only criticisms. I will
the,
talk more about Horace later.
yeah. Okay, we'll get on to that. We'll get on to that. So he was my number 5. So what are we on to? Number 4, big wing guy, Sanguinius.
Okay, interesting. Close again.
Uh,
Okay.
Again, have we recorded this in a year and a half? When hopefully we've got to have 2 books out, or however long it'll be. Maybe it goes up 1 or 2, or
I
whoever,
think it's
however many.
interesting that you're putting him there, and I put him very close. He's my number 3.
He's your number 3. He
Which
is.
friends who know me would have said maybe he would have been higher, but no, he's only at
Yeah,
3, only at 3.
he
But
is.
I think, and that's given that we don't have his Primarch book and we don't
Yeah,
have his
and he hasn't been
signature
in
moments in the
up until the
siege.
siege. He wasn't in much. Like, okay, so
He's
we
been in a
had.
bit though.
He's been in a little bit, but like comparatively
Up
for
until the
someone
siege, I
who's
agree.
so important to the heresy. Okay, we had Ruinstorm. Sorry, we had Fall of Angel. What's it called?
Fear to tread.
Fear to Tread. That's the one. Angels, Falls, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We have Fear to Tread, and then we got Imperium Secundus, basically, haven't we? And then
Yes.
the odd little bit here and there. And then Before the Siege, so if we take Fear to Tread, like, that drop scene at the start almost made me want to collect a Blood Angels arm. It's an interesting book, Fear to Tread, and some people really don't like it, and I understand why. I do like it. I think Sanguinius is great in it. I think the link to his Legion being explored, the Black Rage and the Red Thirst, all that kind of stuff, that like the implications of his psychic kind of nullifying of this issue and all that stuff, and the conflict in the desire not to let it known that there's an issue is great stuff, and I really enjoyed that. Then we get to him unwillingly like taking the throne in Imperium Secundus, and all the issues that causes, and all the pain and anguish and confusion, and yet he still kind of maintains his like image in it. And then Ruin Storm, he gets to unleash a little bit, and all that jazz, and then the siege. Well, Beat Garmin, where he destroys Titan, Warlord Titan, cool.
That's a cool scene.
Yeah, that was a big, and then he just does similar on, in the siege right at the start of Saturnine, and you're like, hold on, he did what? And that was, I remember people going, oh my god, this book's amazing, look, this wonderful set piece. It's like, yeah, that's nothing, mate. And then you go through all the little bits where he's just flying. He knows who he is, and he knows what he means. And if you take the old readings and the kind of suspect that he was given wings for a reason. Like when this was all over, Sanguinius was the guy that was going to stand in front of people as an actual angel, right? When you kind of I kind of accept that as a kind of a thing. He knew that even if he just flies around the walls on Terra, he can have an effect on that fight. And he understands that, and even through those visions that he has and everything else, which he then becomes to understand as well. He's got all the pressure of the visions of him dying to Horus as well, which he sort of made peace with, even though he didn't understand it.
I think that was quite a good decision in the books.
Yeah.
I think if it was a constant threat or a constant
Yeah.
anguish, it could have easily been a bit sort of, okay, yeah, we get it. You're tormented by this. I think the putting it as still being there, but I think that almost connection to his brothers. I thought the decision with someone when they wrote that he and Angron see each other across the walls, and they realise, oh, hang on, these are continent-sized spaces that can't work. So they did it on that almost that connection that they had, and I thought
it was Dan that wrote it. Whoever, in the meeting,
whoever came up with it, yes,
it
exactly, whoever as a team putting it together, that was brilliant. There's some real moments, I think, and I agree with you that knowing element, and it is surprising. You almost feel like some of his significant moments to give them that sort of significant status along with other legions would have happened during the Great Crusade. You don't see that a great deal during the Heresy, but Sanguinius's roles, you do see him quite a lot.
Yes,
including in the opening trilogy, you see Sanguinius quite a lot. You don't see that much of the Blood Angels as a force in quite the same way. Obviously, you do Fear to Tread and similar, but there's not, and they're not doing a great deal in the same way. You don't see some of the other legions do a great deal, even though they
No.
presumably must do.
You also get the
Throughout.
respect from the other Primarchs as well. Like Horus is
Yeah,
like, well, maybe it should have been Sanguinius. Like, and you're
yeah.
like, yeah, maybe it should have. But bearing in mind, so his book, of all, if a siege book can be about one person, Sanguinius is going to have a big part to play in next book. We've got Carbanda Part 2. We've got Defending the Gate. Like, this is a guy who hasn't stopped yet. Like, he's just been doing what he can.
I think one of the author interviews over the siege, they pointed that out, where they had the big white board and they were writing on who was where doing what, and they just kept on coming back to, oh, Sanguinius is there as well.
I think it was
Oh,
Aaron.
and there, and there, and there. Yeah,
I think it was
yeah,
Aaron.
okay,
And we,
yeah.
and Aaron's writing that book. And on top of all that, he's also like making sure that Dawn and the Warhawk don't completely fall out. Like, on top of all that, as well as say being that inspiration, being that he's almost that banner bearer
Yeah.
for the troops as well. And we've got more to come.
I could see people criticising Sanguinius for the way he's portrayed during Imperium Secundus.
Yeah.
That slightly grumpy. I think it was appropriate and fitted quite well, and he needed to do that rather than just. I mean, it would have been ludicrous if he'd been like, "Yes, absolutely, pour it on. I'm the guy for this." Yeah, that would have been crazy. But I could understand people having a criticism, or not a criticism, but disliking that in some way.
Yeah, I can understand disliking of that, but I think I think it's the same thing that happens to Russ a little bit. Is people have their own viewpoint on it. For it, Sanguinius has come back from his fun he's been having with his broken back and everything else.
His literal hell. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. To find to somehow make his way back to an Imperium where they believe and have been told that the Emperor's dead. By the way, you're going to have to be king. And there's no way of knowing what's going on outside this little area. Like, decompress, man. Like, have a few weeks, like, to work it out. Like, so that just seems like why we wouldn't just charge off. Like, and where are you charging off to anyway? And one legion by itself. What I do understand your point, but I do think they're
I
they're
don't share
very
that.
harsh.
I don't have that view,
Yeah.
but I could see what people. I could see. I mean, it's captured by that brilliant cover that Neil Roberts did of him sat on the throne, just looking glum as hell.
Yeah.
He's putting his chin, resting his chin on his fist, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think more of those moments. I say maybe being a book ahead in the siege, or 2 books ahead, because again he then has that pivotal. What happens in the throne room? We don't know. We believe we might know, but we don't know what happens in the throne room. So, like, he's super cool. It's weird that I've put him that high, and yet it's not one where I'm like, I love Sanguinius all the time. Like, it's not. I have to think about who I like before I'm like, yeah, Sanguinius is cool. And then the more I think about it, I'm like, no, actually, he's up there. He's up there. It's not immediate.
No, but in my case, I was a fan of Sanguinius anyway, as a character, and I feel that the recent books, in particular, The Siege, and even before The Siege, have lived up to my hopes, perhaps, for Sanguinius, and I think that says a lot. And you're like, okay, that makes him very cool, which is why he's pretty high for me.
Yeah, cool, Leo. So you're number 4.
Lorgar.
Oh, here he comes. There he comes, snivelling in on his belly. Yep.
Lorgar jumped massively for me because of his Primarchs book. I thought that was a fantastic book. But equally, I find of all the less fighty Primarchs, he is the most compelling, I found, of all of them. Yeah, I find if you said that you talk about someone snivelling in on their belly, if it was Erebus or Corpheiron, yeah, love to hate those guys. Whereas Lorgar, even the moments when he's had some really humbling moments, that's created some of the coolest moments. Seeing him humbled on Monarchia, seeing him even on Istvan, where he's like, "Oh my god, I'm out of my depth." In some way, I thought that was brilliant. Just seeing a character have an arc in the way that he has, I think, is brilliant. it's a rich background that he's got and makes him very interesting as part of it. I don't despise him in the way that you see with some of the others. I did start to go down that route when he starts to make a bit of a play, but then he gets his comeuppance pretty quickly for that.
Yeah, I suppose there's an element for me of how much can I really get on board with the Grima Worm Tongue, like the guy who wants to be the power but isn't really there.
Kinda, yeah.
It just feels like, I'm not saying he is Grima Wormtongue or anything like that, but it's that similar kind of, he can never be the guy on the front poster because
Mm.
he's Lorgar, but there's that need to be there. What um, I do really enjoy Lorgar's book. Um, it undoes a little bit of what Corfarin does in First Heretic, where Corfarin's like, "Oh, I never believed anyway. I was always with the Chaos Gods," and then Erebus is like, "Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, I'm with him." Like, jumps on the bandwagon because that's what Erebus does. And so Lord goes, "Well, I was there anyway. Did you really think that I didn't know that?" And I'm like, "Hold on, how did we get to this point? If you always felt a little bit that way, cool, I'll let that go. That's fine. You can work that out. That's a little bit, no worries." But when you read the first Heretic and you're like, how have you jumped from there to there to there? Like, I just think he was gullible. Maybe I think that's it. I think he's like talking. Argel Tar's talking to a demon.
Mm.
They come out and go, "What did the demon tell you?" "Oh, that sounds really cool. Yeah, we're in." Like, it's like, hold on, talking to a demon, like, who calls it, I think the demon calls itself a demon, something like that. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but it's obviously like there's something funky going on. And then, and don't get me wrong, like, he can be cool without me liking him.
I just think
But
his
the
perspective.
betrayal of Angron, like,
Mm.
I think that selfishness, and it's selfishness for a cause, but it's still there. Like,
Yes, you're right, and it's the
yeah,
selfishness that's perhaps the bit. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. It's the selfishness flaw that is the most dislikable part of his character. But I like it because it kind of adds to the
yeah,
villainous richness of what he's about, and I think there's enough going on in seeing his take and his perspective on things that actually chaos is a good thing. And he's completely all in, all behind it. This is where we need to go. I believe in this
sure.
utterly. And you think, oh, okay. And I now, for someone who I've always taken the perspective of seeing the good in the Imperium and what that image was, to see then chaos and go, oh, actually, yeah, okay. I can see where you're coming from. It
I
is
think
very interesting that that's
I
a
th- I think
perspective
where,
that you can
where
have.
we've talked about, people don't have to be likable for them to
Mm.
be high on this list. Lorgar's so unlikable that it does hurt him. I
There are
just
characters on
just
this list I
don't
like a
like
lot
him at
less
all.
than Lorgar. Mm.
I just him like, I'd be like, if I was in a room with him, I know he's a Primarch and everything, but I'd just be like, "Oh, you are just such a moron." Like, you jumped into this and you seriously looking at, like, don't get me wrong, not thinking the Imperium's a good thing is not, that's not necessarily a bad choice, right? Have a little, open your eyes a little bit to the Imperium here, but to then jump the other way so quickly and to see, like, immediately what was going on with Argel Tal and those, and it's like, at what point can you think this is a cool thing? Um, but yeah, it's cool. It is what it is. I just can't quite grip him. He winds me up.
There's types of characters that I've seen in other franchises and other stories and otherwise that make me think of the kind of Lorgar character, and that's almost sort of superimposed there.
Sure.
There's elements of Tom Hiddleston's Loki. That there's elements of him in the early days, in particular, where he's like screaming at something, and yeah, okay, there's something about that
I would
utterly
say
impassioned port of it, and you're like,
I would say
this is a really cool character.
Loki's got charisma though,
Oh, in spades, particularly
and
later on,
and
in
Lorgar
spades.
doesn't come across as having charisma, even though as a Primarch he
There are
does.
parts of it I think he does. There's parts of it
Yeah,
where he's sort of thinking on things, and but that holier than thou by definition is irritating. But in
Cool.
terms of richness of background, he's up there.
You're allowed to be wrong, Howard. It's fine.
Whoa. We said this is everyone's right in this list. Mainly us, though.
No, yeah, mainly us. So your number 3 was Sanguinius, and
Correct.
mine is Perturabo.
He's high.
He's high because where Guilliman is confined by his narrowness of his how I feel about him, Perturabo is the pendulum that swings hugely both ways.
Yeah,
Right?
I think that's totally fair. I think I've got him a bit low, actually. Yeah.
I could not stand Perturabo for a long time.
Yeah,
He's an utter
that
fool.
hurt him for me. Yeah, I agree with
Yeah. I'm like, get over yourself, mate. Okay, you were made to fight heart battles. Like, every legion's like, were you sent immediately to Rangdan? Like,
yeah.
Oh no, we had to build a siege network and blah blah blah. It's like, well, okay, they threw people into the Rangdan genocide. You know, decimating his legions when he got there, destroying his legion when he went back. Then I read Angel Exterminatus. And I think the first moment in Angel, him building toys was amazing.
Yes, that was good.
His appreciation of art was really cool. The fact that he got to that point in that book fairly early on, and he was like, I broke my oath to the Emperor. I made a mistake, but I'm not going to break my oath again.
Mm-hmm.
So he's on the wrong side, and he knows it, or he knows he shouldn't also be on that side at the very least, and yet his honor won't let him break that, which is a massive flaw, but one I love. And then after that, what did I read? After that, I read Talon would have been next, yeah. And Talon
did it for me. Yeah,
all right,
that was
talk about honor and a belief system. He went to Talon. He turned that place into a graveyard for mechanized forces. He just fed the machine of war in there to get a weapon. And when they finally came to him with the weapon and went, "That's this warp tech," and he went, "Yeah, we don't deal in that. Put it back." And I'm like, all of that he did, but it went against what he believes. So he just refused. Like, if you just think, if only he could have been stronger at the start of the siege, like at the start of the heresy would not have happened because they needed Perturabo. Then you read his Primarch book and you're just like, I hate this guy. I absolutely hate this guy.
There's so much of that, yeah.
What a complete and utter tool. Like, how can you not see what you're doing here? Just a terrible, terrible person.
Yeah.
And then you go into something else. I can't even remember what else. And then you get to the siege, and he's cool. He's doing his little war games against Dawn, and it's fantastic, and it's fun, and it's like, he's gonna break this the thing. Can he do it in time? Probably not, because we know what happens. But he is breaking Dawn down, and then we get the Mortis section, which was even better. It's possibly my favorite moment in the whole heresy.
It is excellent. It is an excellent choice. Yeah.
So for those who don't know, spoilers, whatever. We've got Perturabo sitting in his seat, already being harangued by Horus for not being quick enough, and he's like, "I've got this. Let me fight the war." Because again, he's like, "No, I want to beat Dawn fairly. Right? This is the way I fight. I fight fairly. I can beat him, and I will beat him, but I am doing it my way." That's the limitation, and you told me I would run the siege, so back off. And then you get to, Mortarion's taking over, and you need to step down. He's like, what the heck? And at that point, he's still like, okay, I will do that, but you're making a mistake, and I'm furious with it. And then he orders him to unleash Mortis as a complete corrupted legion, the power of the warp, to win the fight, to break the wall. And at that point, Perturabo's like, "No, this is not my agreement." And at that point, you can see him say, "Well, you've broken the agreement now, so I'm off."
Which is particularly interesting on the back of Saturnine.
Yeah, and with all that went on with Saturnine, and then the effect of literally just, I'm out of here, mic drop. his legion pulling away from Terra allows the
knowing the
Dark Angels to
consequences of that,
sneak in, knowing the
knowing the
knowing
consequences,
they
yep.
are going to be hated, absolutely hated,
blamed for
blamed.
the whole
Yeah,
thing easily, and
yeah.
equally. But then back to the flip side of that is, could they have done it? If they'd have stayed, could they have done it? We almost will now
No,
or
yeah,
never know.
absolutely, yeah, but it and cleverly for the books, it allows like that belief that they could like.
Yeah, that's
You
exactly.
think as
Yeah.
they were, it was like, oh my god, how do this is starting to get a little bit implausible almost, as
Yeah.
implausible as this war could ever be. But
Yeah, as the space walk be. Yeah.
once he's gone, it's like, okay, I understand now how they've got that chance of surviving that little bit longer, because there's 3 or 4 different offshoots that have affected off that point. But that was the breaking point for Perturabo. It was that Horus changed the rules of the game.
Yeah.
And he just went, I don't care who you are, I'm not doing that.
But even that wasn't as straightforward as simply, oh, Horace just changed his mind because he's fickle and
No.
because Chaos said so. It was, well, there's another perspective of that, of you took a gamble on Saturnine and it went really wrong. And not only did it go really wrong, you've cost me the elite of my own forces. So, and you didn't tell me about it either. You didn't get my sanction for this. What the hell? That could have gone a very different. So there's another perspective even on that, which I think is brilliant. Those
and the back and forth with it's like, well, your
Yeah.
man came to me. Like, why haven't you got control of your forces?
yeah,
So,
exactly.
but
Your
yeah,
first captain of all. Yeah, absolutely.
and the fact that Abaddon could dangle that in front of him to say, like, like Abaddon went to him and was like, you can win this war the old-fashioned way, like the real way, the warrior's way,
And the
because
fact that
you just think in the
Perturabo
back of his mind,
resonated.
because he knows there's this pressure to unleash these demonic hordes, like. He doesn't want to be around Angron. Like, it's not. And then on top of all that, in 40k, he becomes a demon prince. Like, how does he get there?
Yeah.
So Perturabo. So I hated Perturabo. Then wanted to do an Iron Warriors army. Then I didn't. Then I did. And now I'm like, oh, how do I not do?
I do quite enjoy that. Whenever there's an Iron
Warriors
Warriors,
army.
something comes out, and I'm going to start the clock now before I get that message from Greg, because it's going to say one way or another what he's going to want to do here.
Yeah,
it was that swinginess that put him lower for me. I think I actually put him too low on reflection, but he's gone up massively.
It's a big personal thing, isn't it? It's like I think the high swings just outweigh the low swings for me, and I think the capstone was Mortis.
Yes, I agree.
And it was like, yes, this guy is in, boom, and it helps that the paint scheme's easy. Whatever kind of Iron Warriors paint scheme you want to do, I'm thinking about brass maybe. It'll be cool, and it'll be easy. So that's cool, groovy. So that's my 3. So we're down to 2 and 1.
You know my 3, yeah.
We do. Magnus. No, sorry. Sanguinius.
Correct.
Okay, so no, my number 2. So I've got Jagatai and Lehman Russ left. Who have you got left? You got Magnus and Horus.
Correct.
Okay, I've gone with Lehman Russ as my number 2.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So he started off as number 1. Right. So there's obviously a thing here where I like the feral guy who's not that feral, right? So that's an obvious, right? We can just accept that is the thing. I think these 2 characters, possibly out of the whole heresy, know themselves better than anyone else. Even within Russ's questioning of himself, he's comfortable doing it because he knows. Like, I just can't see that many people questioning themselves the way that Russ did in Wolf King. Mm-hmm. And Jagatai, he questions, but he knows who he is, and there's this feral nature to them. But it's it's an affect. It's not an affectation. It's more than that. But it doesn't detract from who they are when they're coming to do whatever they need to do. You're right. Russ has that bit where why didn't he stay on Terra? And part of that problem is he didn't in the old law. Part of that I like is that's like more than anyone that's not Russ. He's like, no, I have a job to do. I was given a job. And you know what? I'm going to roll the dice here because if I roll well,
Mm.
then it's over. Like, if I fail, there's still another chance. But I'm going to go out and get Horus.
And I think that's an interesting position for one of them to take, for a Primarch to take, given the position they felt they were in.
Yeah.
And he thinks, well, on balance, this isn't as desperate as it could be.
And he was what, half a second away,
I
a
have to
split
do it.
second away
Yeah,
from doing it.
yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
you know, and then everything's different. And even on that, he had that journey. He had that journey, which I know some people don't like in whatever it's called, the book. His Wolf book, where he goes back to Fenris. And actually, that
Yeah.
expanded on Fenris a lot as well, which I thought was really cool.
Mm,
But he again got to this point where he's like, "Is this the right thing to do?" And it's like, "Yeah, actually, it is."
mm,
Like, and we're gonna try it. And yeah, we were, and it was, they didn't know how far Horus had fallen at
mm.
that point. They didn't know that he wasn't really Horus anymore. Had that been Horus, that probably would have worked. And so on top of all that, we sit there, and some people hate Wolf Lord or whatever it's called, because it's them sitting around moping. It's like, well, it's not. It's them understanding that they can't, right? They can't carry on being who they are. They have to adapt. And again, I just don't think that many legions would do that. And that's led by Russ, and he has Bjorn there, just as a sounding board, just as someone to be there to kind of focus him as much as anything else. I absolutely love it. And on top of that, he is badass, and he doesn't get everything right all the time, but he does. He will if he believes he's right in doing something for the right reasons, he will go for it. I love the fact in the Black Books, it's like he put that call out to Magnus, and if Magnus had answered that call when he got to Prospero, it would have been different.
Mm, mm.
But once he doesn't, it's game on, and it has to be. And do you know what? It's going to be horrible, but he's going to do it anyway because he might not do it, but it's Russ, so I will do it.
I feel your point. That's a really interesting point about them knowing themselves about what they're about. I would say that is more true. I find that to be, let's go with more true than with Khan than
Yes,
I do with Russ. I would put Russ in a similar bracket to Sanguinius and Dawn in that
yeah,
respect.
yeah. Jagatai has this amazing sense of who he is
Mm,
that never needs to waver. Russ got too into character,
mm,
as it were, where Jagatai never lost that. Partly because he was never around enough people to kind of buy it. He
mm,
just didn't care. Um, everything you said about Jagatai is absolutely right. Again, just right from the start, from the freedom to the questioning. Even when he signed up, he was like, "I'm not sure the Imperium's really that great, but it's better than what's around.
mm.
So I'm kind of in, but I'm not really one of you." Um,
Yeah,
but when push comes to shove, and he's asked to be on Terra, yeah, of course he is, because that's where he needs to be.
yeah.
And then you get the cool moments. Then you get the riding out. Then you get his Stormseers who are, you know, legions are echoes of their Primarchs, aren't they? So these Stormseers are like, yeah, magic's dangerous, so we restrict how much we use. Like, you can use it, dudes. Just be
Mm.
careful. Like, Thousand Suns, if you're just restraining yourselves a bit, you can still use psychopath. Oh, no, you didn't. Okay, you're idiots. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay, you ignored all those warnings because you thought you were better
Yeah,
than that. Yeah.
and we get to his first charge out in Saturnine was amazing. The second charge out with Valdor was amazing, and then
Mm-hmm.
the latest book,
Yeah,
Warhawk,
that is
which
brilliant.
was just, and his climactic moments with Mortarion. Mortarion's just too stuck in his ways. Like Mortarion wouldn't even consider the fact that someone would be willing to sacrifice themselves that way
Mm-hmm.
to do the job. He just couldn't comprehend it. Whereas Jagatai knows what the game is here, um, and is play. He is Jagatai's playing a different game to Mortarion. He lets Mortarion think he's playing chess. Actually, he's playing I don't know,
There's a
Titanicus.
few. There's a few. There's a few moments of. It's wonderfully on message. There's a few moments in Warhawk where there's a tiredness again. It
Yeah,
seems to come over so well to Jagatai that makes that even more rewarding somehow.
yeah,
It makes
yeah.
him sort of his thinking on, have I got this right? Is this going to work out all right? But even almost the acceptance of even that does make him. Would you have put, stepping away from that, would you have put Jagatai as high
He would have been up
before
there.
Warhawk?
I can't tell you. He would have been up in the top 4 at least, at the very
Yes.
least, probably top 3. I've loved him from the moment,
Really?
Scars was written. Yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
like Scars was fantastic.
I
He
didn't
was
find him particularly likable through Scars, and as you say,
no,
he doesn't have
yeah,
to be
no,
likable.
that's fine.
He doesn't
Yeah,
have to be likable to be on this list, but I didn't find him as
I
compelling
found his
as.
awkwardness brilliant. Like, what's her name? The character from Scars who goes on into this book. Like she's just frustrated with him the whole time, and he's like, "Yeah, you will be, but I'm not going to be tied down. I'm not going to compromise who I am and what I do, just because someone back on Terra, even the Emperor, tells me to." Jagatai's Primarch book's been a long time since I read it, but yeah, the lines on when he joins the Imperium and he's like, "Yeah, okay, I'm in, but begrudgingly." don't
Yeah.
expect me to conform, and also put more engines on my ships, please. Thank you very much. Yeah, he's always been up there, right from the start with Scars, and maybe that's partly an echo of his Legion as well. But and maybe it's just my love of that savage noble warrior, who has that, who people look upon as that savage, and yet actually has the greatest understanding of who he is. I'm not saying some of the others don't down the line, but you feel it from him, and it's the juxtaposition of how he looks to how he acts, and I
Certainly
love
where
it.
he is in his closing moments, that is that.
Yeah,
As put it, with closing moments, in the part of the story of the arc of that is yeah, superb as a piece of narrative.
awesome. So you're 2 and 1. Which order are we going in? Magnus first, Horus second. Sorry, Magnus
Magnus
number
in 2,
2, Horus number 1.
Horus
That's
up
what
at
I meant.
number 1. Yeah,
Magnus 2,
that is
Horus
the order
number
I've
1.
gone with. And Magnus has jumped around a lot in this list, quite a bit. He was mid-table, then he was up there, and then went all over the place. Again, just the things I've read recently and the way and the amount there is over him. I mean, we've touched on him. I won't go into too much, but I think he's one of the most tragic. It's interesting. I find that both of the top 2 I think about, and that's whereas I find them the most interesting, where they could have been so much more. I love the fact that both your number 2 is Russ and my number 2 is Magnus. There's something lovely about that. There's Magnus in general. What he could have been and almost could still be and continually almost could still be, it's just amazing. And what he is as a reflection, the impact he has on his Legion, the relationship he has with his Legion, the relationship he has with his brothers, what could have happened, this deep frustration of the almost wonderful wish listing of like, oh, what if he had parlayed with Russ or something like that, or it just hadn't made those decisions, or it had gone a different way. It hadn't had quite the consequences that it ended up leading to. And I just find him a really interesting character. In fact, he's a confidant that so many of his other brothers turn to him and will take solace in his advice.
They're wishing they hadn't done that now.
Yeah, quite. But will do so anyway, still, and probably lament not having him around to talk to. Like I usually say, his Primarch bit where he's there, him and Perturabo. It's sort of notionally slightly like, well, it's a slightly odd pairing, isn't it? Well, no, actually, the way they interact, what he does, what he brings out of Perturabo, I think is brilliant. And I just think he's got this fantastic otherness almost, and I'd say the same with Sanguinius. This sort of slightly even extreme amongst the Primarchs. I think that I quite like that. Turn it up to 11 rather than just take a facet of almost a human character and turn that up to an extreme. Well, let's go even further with these guys. I'm a fan of that with what was done with Magnus, and I think there's been a lot written about him, and they go really deep into what he's about and what his Legion's about. You think the arc that Graham McNeil's written with all of the Magnus?
Yeah, Crimson King was slightly awkward one for me.
It's heavy going, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I found it heavy going for me, but I know other people who absolutely love that side of the Thousand Sons, and as a result, found that book fabulous.
Yeah, it's certainly a very interesting book. There's a lot kind of going on with it. But yeah, he definitely had an effect. Old Magnus,
And then Horace,
and
he's up
then
at
the
number one
big
for me,
man.
and we touched on him before. And I think your point about him potentially being absent is interesting, is a fair point. But I put him up there because when he is present, his impact is so seismic, and it's projects so much. It just captures what you kind of want him to be so well. That's why I put him up there. You see him right from the point of the opening trilogy. It still sticks with me when he reaches down and grabs Loken the first time you see him. That
Sure.
still, I mean, what are we now? 12 years? 10 years on from that moment?
No, more than 12. Yeah.
It's so long since they've had that moment
Mm.
where he reaches down and pulls him, and you're like, oh my god. The way that's portrayed of him being so spectacular at what they represent. And the way he is all through that whole trilogy, and then through later books, yeah, fantastic.
I think the first book is him at his best.
Yes.
Not just him at his best, but the writing is him at his best. The way he handles his own dudes, but then the way he handles the other legions as well, allows them, like, feeds them rope to hang themselves on and all that. And at that point, you, like, when you read that first book, you're like, of course Horace was a war master, of course. And yeah, there's and you do see elements of that, but I think that first book is really where he shines brightest, which is fair
I
enough.
agree. And as it should be. But then even when you see him later, and I'm thinking here of Slaves to Darkness, when he's there and the impact he has there, and the moment he announces the move on Terror, they've all gathered. There's still something about the power there. Molech, what he's doing there, and I think it's got harder at the point he ascended and the point they've got to the siege. I think it's almost been difficult because they've needed to keep him back. Much like we don't see that much of the Emperor for obvious reasons, but with throughout, well, we can't see much of him. We can't get too much into the Emperor. You can get to a certain amount with Horus, and you mentioned the Warmaster audio, fantastic. But they've particularly had to do that with the siege, and you've just got those fantastic moments where you've got him playing. There's little tiny moments of him playing off against the Emperor on the psychic plane. And just what we're going to see,
that's
much like with Sanguinius, I think could be. It's going to be. I think he has the impact. To live up to the impact that he needed to have is incredibly difficult, and I think he does.
I think so. For me, where was he? For me, he was 5. I think he could jump up based on the next 2 books for sure.
Yes,
because I think we're going to see him a bit in the next book. I would hope in build up.
I'm not sure we will. I think we're going to see a lot more of the demonic. I think the uptick with Kabanda being obviously a signature piece for that. So I think the uptick in the demonic, but I think they might save him.
But we started to see him a little bit in Mortis, just his interactions with Perturabo, and that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna.
Yeah.
We might not. Like this is me guessing, but I would like to see because we're getting to prep stage for what he has to do. As far as I'm concerned, I still think he's the one that lets the shields down on the Vengeful Spirit. Now, it could be wrong. They might adapt to that moving forwards. But for me, having that as like, I'm going to lose here, I need to finish this now, and the Emperor cannot refuse my challenge. He has to he can't let me get away. I think is a powerful thing. I would like to see that carry on, unless they come up with something amazing. They might, but I think that will happen. And then we've got like thought processes on that kind of thing, and then we've got the fight in and of itself as well. So there's a lot there that would potentially jumping up. But I think Horace is very cool. Don't get me wrong; he's number 5 on this list. But yeah, we'll always lack a little bit in that respect for me. But yeah, Cool. We've done it. We have got to the end.
Well, now we have to. Have you totaled up the
I
points?
literally, while you were talking, I was going through totaling them up. So some
Do you
interesting
need me to
points
have
here.
more thoughts before I?
So basically, I've taken the positions 1 to 18. I've then added up totals, so lowest wins. Before we jump on that, you have scored a Primarch, the highest of all of us. My highest was Fulgrim at 47 points, with Angron just behind at 46, Mortarion at 44.
Interesting.
Yeah, which when you break it down like that, so you had, let me look, you had Fulgrim total 46, just well, higher than him in terms of points scored. Ferrus at 48, Mortarion at 49
Highest.
was your highest, as in worst.
I see.
Yeah,
And I
highest
think
as in
that's.
total score.
I see. Highest, not in as in ranking. I stand by that. And Mortarion, I've never really got on with Mortarion.
No, that's fine. Yeah, so I don't think anyone's too surprised. Well, who was mine again? It was Fulgrim, Angron, and Mortari. Yeah, you know, Lorgar being in there. Yeah, cool. But up the top, so you had 2 scores in single digits, and I had none.
Oh,
So
really? Oh, wow.
I had 2 13s in Magnus and Perturabo, 2 12s in Jagatai and Alfarius, and an
Interesting.
11 in Russ as my top scorer, or best scorer, should I say. You had 2 11s in Jagatai and Magnus.
Interesting.
You have a 9 in Sanguinius. And
Okay.
Horus works out as a number 7.
Interesting,
Right?
because he
2
tops
number
out
1s,
2 of my list. Yeah.
yeah, and a number 5. Like, I mean, it just makes a big difference. What I haven't done yet is added them all up together to get our combined total. So I'm just going to do that. But yeah, I don't think there's any major surprises in that.
There's a couple there. It's fascinating, as you say. We had a momentary time blip in the middle of this session.
Yes,
And
we
it
forgot
was
to
interesting
change that, didn't
going.
we? You rearranged your scores. We forgot to mention that.
I can do that rundown, and I will do so. But it's just as an overall. It was interesting going back to a list I'd written, because I wrote a list as we were going, and even yesterday evening I wrote that again. But I then realised, oh, hang on, I wrote this when we first approached this as a subject, and I got that list, and it was similar, but there were some quite big moves, and I was looking at it thinking, what the hell was I thinking? And it's amazing over a relatively short space of time you
So
can have those thoughts on this, on
yeah,
the thinking. And I was thinking even just the other evening, I found this a really interesting exercise almost in doing this and forcing yourself almost to write it in that order. And I would encourage people to do that for legions over these 3 categories, and just be interesting to see
we're going to have to do that, aren't we?
I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say there was a part 2.
Let us know. Let us know. People
Can
are
you
like,
imagine doing it
no,
for
this has been
legions?
boring enough.
Yeah, be like,
Right.
how can you
So
talk for that long
let
about
me
this?
just go back up. So you changed. So your lion went from 14 to 13.
He did, because I realised I'd
Um,
missed one out. I
what else
missed
was
out
here?
Corax.
Vulcan
So
went up to
shall I go?
12.
I'll run them from
Yeah.
18 down to 1.
Yeah, let's do that. Actually,
In
it's
the
not a bad
classic
idea.
top of the pop style.
Yeah.
Ferrus, yeah, exactly. Ferrus at 18, then Mortarion, then Corax, then Fulgrim, then Kurz, Lion, Vulcan, Perturabo. I'm not sure about that one. Dawn, Angron, Gilliman, Alfarius, Russ, Jagatai, Lorgar, Sanguinius, Magnus, and Horus.
Cool. And mine was Ferrus, Mortarion, the Lion, Lorgar, Fulgrim, Kurz, Angron, Vulcan, Guilliman, Corax, Alfarius, where's number 7? Magnus, Dawn, Horus, Sanguinius, Perturabo, Russ, Jagatai. And I've now added up combined totals.
Ooh,
So there are
weirdly nervous.
joint losers. So a
Okay.
combined total of 93. So what is it? 18 times 6, isn't it? Is the highest possible total. So 108 is the highest possible score you could get.
I'd love it if you just mic dropped now and be like, and actually they're all the same.
Yeah,
Good night, everyone.
no, 93 each for Fulgrim and Mortarion,
Interesting. Right.
with Angron coming in at 86 as the next. There was an 85 for Kurz, which is quite an interesting one. I wouldn't necessarily have thought that going into this, that he would be down there. 83 for Ferris. I can believe that. I mean, he's helped by my number one. If he'd, if I didn't think if I thought that he'd been the worst, basically. It'd have been, basically, it's his model saved him on that one. But if we look at the other end, what's interesting is things like Perturabo. So I've given him a total of 13, and you've given him a total of 37. So he's ended up on 50.
Okay, right.
Like, so there are some, like, when we look at Kurz, 42 and 43, Dawn, 33 and 27, like, quite similar. The Lion, I've scored a lot higher than you, 30 to 12. But like Jagatai, 12 to 11 in totals. Russ 11 to 19, even that's not far away. There's quite a few there that are similar. Magnus 13 to 11, that kind of thing. Like Vulcan 34 and 33 total combined. Like there's a lot there. Alfaris I've put a lot higher than you. I put 12 to 23. But what that's ended up doing is we've got Jagatai on 23, Horus on 23.
Interesting.
And Magnus just behind on 24. So after all this, we haven't actually got a number one.
I sort of love that.
So we're going to scrap it. It's pointless. Throw it all away.
This was a waste of everyone's time. Good night, everyone. Good night.
Yeah. So we had. So we got those three. Sanguinius at 29, and then Lehman Russ is at 30. So we only had 4 that scored less than 30. Yeah. So Jagatai and Horus take it as joint greatest Primarchs fact. We're going to put that on a plaque and put it on the wall outside Warhammer World.
If only there was some sort of game we could play where you could have the two face off against each other and see who came out on top.
And discuss their lore. No.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I say there were some interesting things thrown up there, like that I wouldn't necessarily have thought would happen. There are some big jumps, like those ones we consider like who don't score well. Apart from Ferris would be, I say, if I didn't love his model so much, which is easy not to do, then that he could have been.
I'm looking over my scores now, and Ferris's model didn't score brilliantly with me.
No. In fact, he scored six above the minimum.
Quite. Yeah.
So I think that was the highest. Yeah, that was the highest individual, like the worst individual score we had. But that was cool.
It's been an interesting, it's been a genuinely interesting exercise by virtue of the fact we've been able to talk for so long about it. But you just can with this, can't you? Such a rich subject.
I mean, if we did it again next week, it would be different.
Of course.
Should we do it again? No, yeah.
Yeah. We're doing this annually, aren't we?
Yeah, why not? Absolutely.
Because there's going to be so much new information out by then.
Yeah, once they release new rules for Primarchs, we'll have to do that as well. It's fine. It's all good. But that's quite interesting. I don't know how to break them up. I mean, Jagatai scored the lowest. Like each of us put them about the same, whereas Horus was a bit more split. But we'll do them as combined winners. Stuff it. Not a problem. Not a problem at all.
That is quite a surprise. Yeah, that it's as tight as that. I find it interesting that some of the, like as we've said, background, we've ended up with it's been a lot closer, our ordering, than some of the others, which have been wildly differing in some places. I'm looking at that list now, and I look at Perturabo and I think that was a bit low. Maybe Gellerman's a bit high, but there's little tweaks and things you can make like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Like, in a week, and it'll be completely different.
You gave essentially you put Perturabo 24 points behind me.
Wow,
which is quite a big difference. One of the bigger differences.
Well, I don't like his model.
And that's fair enough.
I'm still not a huge fan of his model. His rules and his background I rate, but not massively.
That might actually be the biggest difference in the scores. Is Perturabo. The Lion, I've got him 18 points. Yeah, 18 points like worse than you have.
Because I'm a big fan of his model. I think it's a superb
Yeah.
model, and I quite like his rules.
And then I think the only other one was Lorgar's, and Lorgar's only 16 points difference. So yeah, it's like Perturabo's out on his own there with the Lion, trying to catch up as being the widest variance between the two. Interesting stuff. Well, I thought it was anyway. I don't care if
it's a
anyone
good little
listens to this or
I'm
not.
sure there's whole other ways one could create this system, but
they would be wrong because we were first, and therefore we are right.
Until next time.
Now we need to do it with the individual characters from.
First captains, obviously.
First captains. Oh my word! Could you imagine? There's not enough models, thankfully, are there? Are they all out? They might all be out. I don't know. I've lost track. There probably is. Yeah, there probably are.
List.
To be fair.
Who's first captain?
I can't.
Is Corfeyron first captain of the Wordbearers?
I lose track. No, I can't even remember what his position is now. My mind's too broken by trying to work this all out.
Space Wolves don't have a first captain.
Yeah, no, don't need one, mate. Sorted. Tough enough.
Gilliman
for
Ultramarines. Anyway, this is a silly game.
Yeah, absolutely. My brain is too fried to think as people are sharing at their
that's a pretty good
phones.
Time to
I think we'll call that. We can have we'll have to think of topics now for the next episode. Oh,
what?
Unbelievable! It's been nice being able to just plan 3 episodes out in one go. Doing that. Okay, cool. Okay, yeah. Well, if you've got ideas for topics, please let us know.
Some sort of answering episodes to this.
To be honest, I would love to see people kind of, not necessarily. Maybe they want to do a point scoring system and see what they come up with. If you want to feed your results into the onto the Facebook thread or email them in or whatever, and see if they're wildly different from us. See how much you think we're wrong when actually you're the one that's wrong. It's fine. That's allowed. Because they are, they are so. Although there are generally I think there are certain sections which the majority of people will fit stuff into. Very easy to have a very, very different view on every single aspect of this. I think the rules is probably the easiest one to break down in terms of are they good or not.
It's almost directly quantifiable rather than being utterly subjective.
I can't imagine like someone having someone 16 places different based on their rules. But you never know. It could happen. So excellent stuff. I think we'll have to leave that there then, Mr. Howard.
A pleasure.
Indeed. And we'll be back for more heresy as we go on through 2022. Blimey.
Looking forward to it already.
Cheers.
Cheers, Sudi.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Imperial Truth Podcast. As usual, you can contact the show, Greg at theimperialtruth.com, or you can find it on Twitter, imperial_truth. At Child of Fang is my my Twitter and my Instagram as well. And you can feedback on anything, as we said on the show. If you want to give us your lists, please feel free. Send them in via that, or what would be good is if you can reply on the Facebook thread for this show, then we can kind of have a collection of them there, which would be really cool to see what different people think, frankly, because as we said, it's going to be a lot of variance in this. If you have any ideas for things you would like us to cover in 2022, then please send us an email with what those ideas are. If you wish to support the show, you can do the very easy things of telling a friend about it or leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to the show, because we're on Amazon Music now and Spotify and wherever else. So you have all those options. for leaving a review. If you feel the show is valuable enough for you to give $1 or more a month, then we have Patreon. Links in the show notes. We also have a Ko-Fi account as well, coffee account. I keep doing that wrong now, winds me up. We have a coffee account, so if you want to give a one-off amount, that's probably better for that. I understand that not as many people will use it that way, and that's fine. It's cool. It's not a problem. But if anyone has done that, then thank you very much. This show will always remain free. Please don't forget that. We are putting it out there for you to listen to. But it's been a long episode. I don't want to warble on too much. Maybe I'll see you at an event or two. As I say, not going to Adepticon this year. Really, with everything going on, I can't afford to get stuck out there if I test positive. So, with great disappointment, I cancelled my hotel reservation and will be putting that money back in the pot for Adepticon 2023 because I really want to get out there and see all my mates from all the different game systems and get some gaming in. Adepticon's the standout event for me because of the scope of what goes on there. So I am desperately hoping to get out there. But yeah, hopefully 2022 will provide us plenty of heresy stuff anyway. Fingers crossed. So yeah, I am going to leave it there. Have a great new year, peeps. Let's hope it improves for all of us. And until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.